Good evening, members, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Council at the Guildhall. Please be seated.
Is that all right? Please, do you want to slightly further forward?
Yes.
No,
It's all right. It's okay. As usual, our meetings are being webcast so that residents and other members of the public have the chance to see them live or view them on demand later if they wish. In the unlikely event of an emergency requiring us to evacuate the building, please make yourselves aware of the emergency exits and follow the instructions of the security staff who are present this evening. May I now remind everyone to ensure the microphone is directly in front of you, no further away than a sheet of A4 paper. And please speak directly into the microphone so that your breath hits the grill on top. Please also ensure that papers and laptops don't obscure the microphone. And as usual, please continue to behave respectfully and appropriately at tonight's meeting. I would like us to have a good, productive debate, giving as many members as possible the opportunity to have their say. I would also like to remind members at this stage that the guillotine will fall 3 hours and 30 minutes after the start of the main meeting. I intend to have one break tonight during the meeting and at an appropriate point for 15 minutes. Apologies. I have received apologies from Councillor Nelson, who is absent on parental leave, and Councillor Fisher. Do members have any other apologies to report? Councillor Rare.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Pearson as well.
Thank you. Can I remind members and officers to please turn your mobile phones to silent and to mute any other electronic equipment for the duration of the council meeting? Thank you. Before we move on to the business of the meeting, can I remind everyone of our agreement at the July 2023 meeting of full council, when we passed a motion requiring the Lord Mayor to remind us about our net zero targets. With that in mind, you will all be aware that York's target for net zero is 2030. We need to adapt and thrive despite extreme weather and encourage new skills and jobs to ensure a just transition. However, this is just the start. With only 1,929 days to the 31st of December 2029, the challenge is immense. We must and shall continue to work together to address the climate emergency. As usual, please speak clearly during debate and use your microphones. Can you also please remember to switch off your microphone after speaking? Please indicate that you wish to speak by raising your hand. I will then call upon you to speak at the appropriate time. I would like to state at this point that I am exercising my discretion as set out in the Council Procedure Rules, Part B3(2), and I intend to vary the order of the motions on notice in order to bring forward the community response to Israel-Gaza conflict. To help us get through business effectively tonight, I'd be grateful if we could keep the meeting focused and to the point. I will keep us on track if I feel we're losing focus. Item 1, declarations of interest. May I ask all members who have a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest in any of the business to be discussed at tonight's meeting to declare your interest now if you have not already done so in advance on the register of interest. Item 2. Do I have members' approval to sign the minutes of the council meeting held on the 17th of July 2024? Thank you. All right. It has been a busy summer for us. We welcomed Lord Mayors and Mayors from all over the county on Yorkshire Day to what was the biggest meeting of mayors ever. I think from looking on the internet, the collective noun for a group of mayors is a chain gang. Not surprising when you look at all the chains on display. It was blinging. It was a really good day that showcased the different cultures that make up our inclusive and amazing city. I would like to pass on my thanks to the staff who worked hard and made this day so special and uniquely York. And whilst I'm in the thanking mode, I'd like to pass my thanks on to the Mansion House staff and everyone else who managed to put on our magnificent Georgian festival. Among other things, I learned how to show my displeasure by using the language of fans. Earlier this month, our twin city of Dijon marked the 80th anniversary of their liberation from occupation. It was an opportunity not only to reflect on the past and remember those who are no longer with us, but also learn from what happened. I recorded a message in French to show our support and uphold our connection with our twin city, which the sheriff passed on to Dijon. I also joined the Flight Path Association. That's a family of 3 nations, the UK, Germany and the Netherlands, for a service of remembrance and rededication of the memorial of the last German warplane to crash on British soil, killing all 4 crewmen and 3 York civilians. This amazing group formed friendships after the war with the aim of promoting peace and healing the wounds of history. Mutual respect, understanding and bridge building are key words. We have so much to learn from these groups. I hope that we will think about that in tonight's meeting. We now come to the public participation session. We have 10 registered speakers tonight. Before we proceed with our speakers, I would like to remind all our public speakers of the rules relating to public participation set out in our Constitution. In exercising their public participation rights, a member of the public is entitled to express views positive or negative about the performance of the council, but must not say anything which is defamatory or discriminatory, make any personal attack on an officer and or member, disclose confidential or exempt information, including personal information. I now call upon our first speaker, Richard Murgatroyd, who would like to speak on agenda item 8, specifically the motion concerning Gaza and Palestine. Mr. Murgatroyd, you have up to 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Madam Mayor. I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Douglas for moving the motion on Palestine tonight, and it is most timely. For over the last 11 months, we have witnessed a tragedy unfold in Gaza, unprecedented in modern times. And at the same time, the land grabs, oppression and violence in the occupied territories of historic Palestine, like the West Bank, has intensified. The screws are constantly being tightened, including the arbitrary imprisonment of nearly 10,000 Palestinians, including hundreds of children without trial or charge, and no due legal process that we would recognise has occurred. Conclusive evidence has emerged that Palestinian prisoners have been killed in custody and subject to torture. And all this is evidenced, well documented by reputable international agencies like Amnesty International. Please bear these facts in mind when you consider the amendment proposed by Councillor Stewart, which assumes, as far as I can see, the Israeli state is operating within the rule of international law. It isn't, and this is by design. For the openly stated aim of the Netanyahu government is to create a greater Israel, and I'll quote him now, from the river to the sea. To quote him. In order to do that, it will be necessary to systematically drive out or suppress the native Palestinian population. And that, council, is why we use the term genocide. It isn't used lightly. So the direction of travel could not be clearer and will continue just as so long as the international community tolerates apartheid aggression, war crimes and genocide. And this brings us back to the motion tonight and York City Council's role. Once this motion has been passed, which I assume it will, what next? Councillors, there are many things you can do. Use your position on the North Yorkshire Pension Fund to ensure banks and companies associated with Israel do not receive investment. Do the same with the considerable funds and investments the council holds in its own right. Thoroughly audit the council's large procurement programme to exclude companies complicit with the genocide. By joining the growing movement of boycott, divestment and sanctions, you can send a powerful signal that our proud city doesn't just talk about human rights, but is actually committed to promoting them. So the motion tonight is just a first step. Let's unite together as a moral community. Let's, brought together by our shared humanity, determined to do everything in our power to end the unfolding Gaza genocide and secure peace and justice for Palestine. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our second speaker, Roger Kaufman, who would also like to speak on agenda item 8, specifically the motion concerning Gaza. Mr. Kaufman, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Roger. I'm a member of York Health Workers for Palestine and York Palestine Assembly. I worked locally as a GP before I retired. As a GP, I had the joy and privilege of delivering babies into this world. And I've been the first person to rush through the front door of a house screaming in agony at the discovery of a cot death. I'm the grandfather of 4 beautiful girls and a grandson, first birthday next month. 16,000 children killed, slaughtered, murdered, other children maimed, blinded, burnt for life, children orphaned. 16,000 children, 16,000 Palestinian children. How, why, I ask myself. Why, when the highest authorities in this world talk of war crimes, crimes against humanity, talk of apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing. These are not words, they're legal entities that define our humanity, our morality. These are not words, they are Palestinian children. How, why have we in Britain allowed ourselves to become complicit in these atrocities? How, why do these children have to die? I can only speak for myself, but I see power, I see politics, I see vested interests. I see racism. Racism used as a tool, leading directly to the death of 16,000 children. Again, speaking for myself, I condemn international politicians. I condemn our national government and our so-called leaders. I commend York Council to do the right to do what is right, what is moral, and to use the powers that we gave you to call for an immediate, permanent, and meaningful ceasefire, to go some small but very significant way to end this unbelievable carnage.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when the item is dealt with. I now call upon our third speaker, Josh Goldman, who would also like to speak on agenda item 8, specifically the motion concerning the conflict in Palestine. Mr. Goldman, you have up to 3 minutes.
My name is Josh Goldman. I've lived in York for 5 years. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of York and a Jew. In May, I was disgusted to hear that my university had still failed to even release a statement condemning Israel's ongoing genocide of Palestinians. Even worse, their justification for doing so was a fear of taking sides in a religious issue or of offending the Jewish community. Their excuse was my identity. Many members of the University of York community were also outraged at the inactions. I joined the York Encampment for Palestine, and with massive support from the community, protests involving hundreds of students and dozens of disruptions and protracted negotiations over many months, the university was pressured to release a statement, divest from weapons, and provide direct support to the Gaza Education Center. Last month, I find out that my council in my city of sanctuary has also failed to even make a statement, let alone make any meaningful divestments from companies that invest in weapons and an Israeli occupation. This too is apparently for a fear of taking sides or offending the Jewish community. Well, I am here to tell you that you have taken a side and you have offended. I won't recount to you the ways in which this government is responsible for these crimes. I know you know how this nation aids, facilitates, and excuses these atrocities. I won't recount to you evidence of these horrors. I know you know what is occurring in Palestine is wrong. You have seen it. Journalists, doctors, children, their bodies broken, their bodies in pieces, their bodies in bags, being weighed as scraps of flesh just to estimate how many were killed. When you see that and do not condemn it for fear of taking a side or for fear of offending Jews, you are calling our religion one of atrocity. You are using my faith to justify your inaction, your cowardice, and your failure. And I say you have no right to do so. It is not just offensive, it is the most grievous insult I have ever received. I faced it from my university, and now I see it in my council too. There is no sanctuary in this city while it fails to condemn genocide or make any attempts to separate itself from its government's complicity. Not for any Palestinian is there sanctuary, not for any Jew, not for any conscientious citizen. You are members of a government that is complicit in genocide. So long as you delay, distract, and avoid, you are complicit. You are guilty. I call you to condemn this genocide because it will be remembered if you do not. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our fourth speaker, Naomi Wigley, who would also like to speak on agenda item 8, specifically the motion concerning the conflict in Gaza. Mrs. Wigley, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am a nurse in this city of sanctuary. I have lived here most of my life and now raise my 2 children here. I'm deeply proud to be part of a community that believes in compassion, protection, and dignity for all people, regardless of where they come from. Today, I'm here to ask you to extend that spirit of sanctuary to the people of Gaza, who are living through a humanitarian catastrophe. I am asking you to support an end to the genocide in Gaza and ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those in desperate need. Right now, Gaza's healthcare system is in ruins. Hospitals have been bombed, clinics destroyed, and essential medical supplies frequently run out. As a nurse, I cannot imagine the horror my fellow healthcare professionals, my colleagues, are facing. They are being killed while trying to save lives. They are struggling to care for patients without electricity, without clean water, and without the medicines they need to treat the wounded. What is happening in Gaza is more than a healthcare crisis. It is a systematic destruction of the very means to preserve life. Healthcare workers like myself have a duty of care to others, even in the most difficult circumstances. But in Gaza, this duty is being made impossible. The destruction of medical facilities and the targeting of healthcare professionals is not just a violation of international law, it is an assault on humanity itself. The world cannot stand by while those who care for others are being prevented from doing so. We in the UK and here in this city have shown immense compassion for the people of Ukraine during their time of need. We opened our hearts and our homes and our resources to support them. We must now do the same for Gaza. This is not about choosing a side. It is about standing up for human life. We cannot claim to be a city of sanctuary if we turn a blind eye from those who are suffering in Gaza. The people of Gaza are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. They need food, water, medication, shelter, and medical equipment. They need access to healthcare. It is essential that you, as the people's elected voice, call on this government to push and push for an end to this genocide and to allow humanitarian aid to reach those in desperate need. Lives are hanging in the balance. And beyond the immediate crisis, we must prepare to support the rehabilitation of Gaza after the violence ends. We must be ready to help rebuild Gaza's decimated infrastructure. As a human rights city of sanctuary, we must take action now to call for an end to the genocide, to open the doors to humanitarian aid and to support the rebuilding of a shattered healthcare system. We have a responsibility to advocate for peace, justice, and humanity. I urge you to do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our fifth speaker, Mohammed El Gomati, who would also like to speak on item 8, specifically the motion concerning the conflict in Gaza. Mr. Go, you have up to 3 minutes.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. First, I want to thank the City of York Council for considering the petition we submitted about 9 months ago, signed by over 1,500 people from the City of York. These signatories from all walks of life are united by their shared human values and belief that the ongoing tragedy in Gaza must end. I urge the Council to uphold York's values as a city of sanctuary and the UK's first human rights city by calling for an immediate ceasefire, the restoration of essential services in Gaza, and the release of all hostages and detainees. I would like to share with you a personal experience. Recently, a few weeks ago, at an international conference in the Czech Republic, I reconnected with colleagues I've known for over 30 years through my work with the EU to raise the scientific standards in Eastern and Central European states that have joined the EU in the 1990s. These relationships were built on mutual care for each other's welfare and families. I asked about them, they asked about my family. Similarly, during over 40 years in academia, I taught and supported Palestinian students or those of Palestinian heritage, many from Gaza. Today, all 3 universities in Gaza are in ruins, and hundreds, if not thousands, of fellow academics and students have been killed or injured. Heartbreakingly, I don't know if any of my former students is alive or dead. I didn't teach them to be slaughtered. The Lancet, one of the world's most prestigious journals, reported that around 8% of the people of Gaza have been killed. Nearly 200,000, more than the population of York. Imagine, and I say from deep my heart, God forbid, imagine waking up to find York completely destroyed, its people gone, families shattered, and friends lost. This is Gaza's ruins today. As citizens of York, we have a moral
30
obligation
seconds.
to stand against the apartheid system Israel is imposing on the Palestinians. Even Israeli human rights organizations, such as B'Tselem, have declared that the situation in Gaza and the occupied territories amounts to apartheid, just as we once stood firmly against apartheid in South Africa. We must do the same now. I call on the Council to take action, impose sanctions, and stand on the right
Thank
side
you.
of history.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Elgamati. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I will now call upon our sixth speaker, Jane Carter, who would also like to speak on agenda item 8, specifically the motion concerning Gaza. Ms. Carter, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank the Council for proposing this resolution, but I have to ask, what took you so long? What were you waiting for? Between October 7 and November 13 last year, 4,609 children were killed and many more listed as missing, but there was no call for ceasefire then. Almost a year of genocide has passed and we see 284 aid workers killed, some explicitly targeted by Israeli missiles, including British aid workers. Over 500 health workers killed, many arrested and tortured, with no sign of Hamas control centers being found in Gaza's hospitals. At least 113 journalists and media workers killed, with no international journalists allowed in. And to date, as we heard from the last speaker, tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, with thousands more unaccounted for under the rubble of their buildings. But we become numb to hearing such awful statistics, which are mounting every day. Over 1 in every 100 Gazans is now dead, and many are barely clinging to life. The levels of trauma, injury, starvation, and suffering are unimaginable in a territory slightly smaller than the Isle of Wight. The number of amputees is unprecedented, with the WHO estimating that 85,000 people now require at least one prosthetic limb. Most of them are children whose childhood has been stolen. This is not a war on Hamas. This is not a religious war or conflict. In fact, it is not a war at all. It's a genocide whose goal is to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip of its indigenous population, just as other parts of the historic territory of Palestine were cleansed. It's clearly written in the speeches that Netanyahu's made. The ICC, the ICJ, South Africa, Ireland, Spain, many others have taken courageous steps to call out Israel and its far-right leaders for their true intent. Under international law, Israel does not have the right to self-defense in land it occupies militarily. However, the occupied population does have a right to defend themselves. And let's remember, apartheid in South Africa was brought to an end by the power of a global sanctions and boycott campaign, isolating the white supremacist regime from the world. This is the power that we have to divest from all investments linked to Israel and the arms trade, to boycott all Israeli products and cut ties to Israeli institutions, whether academic, cultural, or governmental. We may feel we don't have much power to influence the course of this genocide, but collectively we do. If the term human rights city is to mean anything, how can we ignore the worst human rights violations seen in our lifetime taking place daily in plain sight and do or say nothing? What took you so long?
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our seventh speaker, Gwen Swinburne, who would like to speak on corporate scrutiny and governance matters. Ms. Swinburne, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As we have protesters, extra security, and 6 of the 10 speakers are speaking on Gaza, as well as a motion over a matter over which this council has zero responsibility, power, or influence, I can only look forward to the day when only the business that this council can address within its powers will be allowed. But as we are here, I note that despite all the clear messaging from this Labour administration over women's rights and equality, there is absolute silence on the outrage ongoing in Afghanistan. This is where women under the Taliban not only are to be totally covered, they are now not allowed to be even heard in the street, to be completely erased, yet silenced from York Labour. Lord Mayor, I wish to speak on the outrage that is scrutiny in this council. The leader spoke to the media in September 2022, saying, "It may be clever to scale back the democratic function to a point where it struggles to function, but it seriously damages trust in our decision makers." Yes, it does. Yet you have continued this democratic outrage. You have completely abandoned servicing scrutiny services beyond minuting. I have seen only one scrutiny meeting this year where the statutory officer attended. Worse, not even £17,000 could be agreed to have a specialist group help frame any scrutiny improvement journey. I expect this council is unique in having zero scrutiny staff, making a mockery of the law. Finally, Lord Mayor, I support the motion on streamlining and reviewing of Res Park. However, I would ask that the report consider that the entire city be Res Park. I propose this in part as you don't charge cost for service, you charge us far more, i.e. it is a tax. This means once again that the more deprived inner wards are being taxed extra. There are further benefits for the traffic flow if people park on their drives and not on the highway or usually footways. If people have no drives, then they pay for parking rights just like us. It should improve use of park and ride, increase council income, be fair. It would reduce infrastructure damage and congestion and make it safer for cyclists. It's a win-win. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted. Thank you. I now call upon our 8th speaker, Flick Williams, who will be joining the meeting remotely to speak on agenda item 6, specifically the report of the executive leader and agenda item 8 concerning the local plan. Ms Williams, you have up to 3 minutes.
Lord Mayor, when Council later debates the Liberal Democrat motion on the local plan, I should like members to consider the following. Policy H3 on the housing mix as currently written falls short. This authority has no specified commitment to accessible homes and lifetime home standards beyond what is considered specialist provision and extra care facilities. Whilst I obviously welcome executives signing off on the Lowfield Green development for learning disabled people, more concerning was the statement that this will likely be surrounded by housing for older people. This is a policy that creates pockets of segregated provision, or to put it more bluntly, ghettoisation. This is not consistent with the social model. Disabled people of every age and impairment need to be fully integrated into the wider community. The revisions proposed to the National Planning Policy Framework currently out for consultation are hugely disappointing. Disabled people get not one single mention throughout the whole document, just like we were invisible in Labour's election campaign, and the trend continues. The last Conservative government, for its many faults, had committed to establish the M42 standard as the regulatory baseline for all new homes. They announced it in 2022 and were one further round of industry consultation away before it came into force, which they failed to achieve in time. There also needs to be a clear requirement included within the planning regulations for all development to include provision for a suitable level of wheelchair user dwellings, M4, 3A or 3B, to address the chronic shortage of currently available stock. This is desperately needed to meet the current unmet demand and the predicted future needs for such accommodation. The access industry recommends a quota of 10%, given that 93% of the current housing stock is inaccessible to wheelchair users. Many of us were relying on this to update local plans. So here we have an impossible chicken and egg situation. The National Planning Policy Framework isn't going to mandate this, and as you don't have a policy that embraces it, it seems you aren't intending to ask for it either via the consultation. Not all disabled people who require accessible housing are known to adult social care. Disabled students arrive at both universities every year, with many choosing to remain and make their lives in the city. Every year, many people become wheelchair users and find their housing no longer works for them. Some will have the means to make accessible adaptations if they are homeowners, but as home ownership becomes increasingly out of reach for many in our extremely expensive city, that will decrease as an option over time. This is an overlooked, totally neglected sustainability issue. We're about to build hundreds of new homes. We need accessible homes as part of every housing development. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our 9th speaker, Jeff Beacon, who would like to speak on agenda item 6, specifically the report of the executive leader. Mr. Beacon? Thank you. You will have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This may sound like a bit of a light relief after some of the previous, but it is serious. There are some good bits in the recent York local plan, York local transport plan, but York is still aiming for net zero by 2030. Sadly, that is a delusion. York's affluent 2-car families living near the Outer Ring Road have been estimated to have emissions 4 or more times as many emissions as those residents in Guildhall and Fishergate. The 2-car affluent will run out of their remaining carbon budgets for a 1.5 degree rise above the average global temperatures in 2 years. 8 years for the disastrous 2-year rise. Net zero actually means no flying, no driving, no eating beef, no heating homes with gas. Electricity may be largely decarbonised by 2030, but the high polluters mostly heat their homes with gas. York is not addressing this, not even telling the high polluters of the problems they are causing. Housing is out of the reach of poor and young. A good start to correct this will be car-free housing, not the 2-car per household developments recently approved by planning committees or envisaged in the York local plan. Residents in these will still trash carbon budgets. Enough car-free housing will substantially cut housing costs because affluent motorists will not bid for them. I will forward a link to a suggested plan I have for York for car-free housing, which begins to address the problem. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted, and I now call upon our 10th speaker, Ben French, who would like to speak on behalf of David Alexander regarding the submission of a petition by local residents for action on both York's green spaces and bar walls, and also relating to the urgent need of repair to Hull Road Park. Mr. French, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors. I'm here to speak in a personal capacity on behalf of David Alexander, who is here, and he's given me the following statement. I'm here to speak in favour of the petition in item 5 to restore Hull Road Park and Beck to its former glory. As presented by Councillor Moroney, it has had over 900 signatures. A similar petition by Shane Sainer calling for the restoration of York's parks and bar walls with over 2,000 signatures has been presented to local ward councillors but not entered to this meeting. I have a copy and I ask that it is also to be accepted along with the current petition. Since I walked the length of Osborwick Beck in Hull Road Park in June, accompanied by Jonathan Dent of St Nick's and local ward councillors, I've held a public meeting with residents with the above attending, alongside Dave May, who is the council's estates manager. At this meeting, several concerns were raised, including the fact that the recent changes that had been made to the Beck were not what many local residents were led to believe, as stated in a decision session led by the Council Member for Environment in July 2017. Since this meeting, we believe changes were made with little to no consultation with residents in a lockdown era consultation process. At the recent residents' meeting, Dave May stated that what was wanted, a full cleaning of the Beck and further work, would cost £500,000. I have walked the Beck several times since and found a huge amount of damage to railings, riverbanks and more that I now believe could cost over £1 million to fix. I've recently invited local ward councillors to view the further damage I believe caused by the changes already made. I believe that winter floods and rain could undermine the banks and cause the path and railings to collapse and give way. It is my belief that the council should halt any immediate works and seek out an independent professional opinion. Some remedial work should be carried out to prevent the situation becoming worse. I urge the council to consider improvements as the park is a matter of great importance to many local residents. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted. And that concludes the public participation session this evening. Before we move on to item 5, I understand that Councillor Baxter wishes to submit a motion without notice under Rule B14(2)J of the Procedure Rules in order to suspend Procedure Rule B5(1). Councillor Baxter, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, that's correct. I'm seeking Council's consent to move a motion without notice under Rule B14 of the Procedure Rules in order to suspend Procedure Rules B5, and this is to submit the petition for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Waller. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Second bit.
I will take a vote on the motion. All those in favour of the motion to suspend the procedure rule, please.
Sorry, I genuinely
Sorry.
have no idea what's just been proposed and seconded. No idea at all.
Sorry, I missed that.
Lord Mayor, for the public, could you just explain what's happening? It's for those of you who are fully aware of the procedure that Councillor Baxter outlined, they will understand. For anybody else like the public gallery or the millions watching at home have absolutely no clue what's just happened.
Okay.
If I can assist, Lord Mayor, the motion without notice is seeking consent from council to suspend the time limit for submitting petitions to be considered at this meeting. Ordinarily, petitions need to be submitted the 8th working day before the council meeting. By agreeing to this change for this meeting only, petitions can be submitted directly to this meeting as well. Is that helpful to councillors?
Are you happy with that explanation, Councillor Stewart?
Yes, I don't think a bit of advanced briefing would have been a bad thing as a courtesy, but yeah, I understand what's going on now. Thank you.
Apologies for that. I am sorry. Are you happy that we take the vote on this then? All those in favour of the motion to suspend the procedure rule, please raise your hands now.
Unanimous.
No, it's not.
It's 41 in favour.
Thank you. All those against, please raise your hands. And all those abstaining? Thank you. The motion is carried. We will receive the petitions in question after the petition submitted on notice. Now on to item 5. Formal notice has been received of one petition to be presented this evening. The council procedure rules allow 1 minute to present a petition to the council. I now invite Councillor Myers to present the petition in relation to community pharmacies.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I rise to hand this petition into council on your behalf as well as mine, as my colleague in Clifton Ward. I want to thank the 650 signatories of the petition and ask council to note that after 2 pharmacy closures in my community, Clifton is now a pharmacy desert. And having received 3 new applications for a new pharmacy, I want council to agree with me that it's a shocking decision of the NHS Integrated Care Board to reject all 3 of those applications, which, given the disparity in health outcomes in my community of Clifton, notably a 10-year difference between life expectancy than other parts of York, I want to say that it's a ridiculous claim that members of my community should be expected to do a 3-mile walk round trip when they need health services. And so I ask the council to use every lever possible from this point forward. I thank the council to this point for producing the needs assessment.
Thank you, Councillor Myers.
Okay, I'll finish by saying we've got to restore community services, pharmacy services in Clifton.
Thank you. In accordance with the council procedure rules, that petition will be referred to the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. Councillor Maroney, I invite you to present the petition relating to Hull Road Park.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If I may, I'll sit so perhaps people can hear. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present a petition on behalf of the local residents of Hull Road Ward, who recognise the benefits of the park and nature for community well-being. The petition was originally concerned about the removal of railings around Osbaldwick Beck, which runs through the park, but the petition acknowledges these plans have since been scrapped. We understand some residents who've signed the petition are expressing concerns about works arising from an earlier 2017 executive member decision taken in order to clean up the beck and make it more welcoming to wildlife again. I hope this petition will present members with an opportunity to consider the works in more detail, the planned benefits, and how they're meeting the expectations of the whole community living around Hull Road Park.
Thank you, Councillor Mulrooney. In accordance with the council procedure rules, that petition will be referred to the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. Councillor Waller, I invite you to present the petition relating to the Connections number 16 bus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to submit this petition from Lincoln Court Residents Association relating to the bus change that's happened since the 2nd of September. It's only had a few days to run before seeing that it was not delivering a service needed, which would have missed the deadline for registering normally. So under these circumstances, it's a welcome opportunity because it would have waited until the next full council. So the petition is, we, the undersigned residents of Lincoln Court and surrounding streets, call on City of York Council and Connections Bus Company to sort out the timetable and frequency of the number 16 bus, signed by 46 residents so far. And this results from cancellations and significant delays, which are disrupting what is only an hourly service for an area of the city where the alternative routes are a long way off. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. In accordance with the council procedure rules, that petition will be referred to the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Mason.
When you finish, Lord, I've got another petition to present.
Yes.
Happy for me to go?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Hard to see and talk. I'll start again. 730, God, now I'm exaggerating now. 2,734 residents have signed a petition which is restore the condition of York's parks and bar walls. I think we've all seen a decline in the state of the bar walls, particularly this year with the reductions in how they're managed. We've seen obviously with parks, and we've got the petition particularly for Hull Road Park, which obviously has fallen into a real state of disrepair. So I'm pleased to hand this forward and hopefully it gets considered by scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you. In accordance with the council procedure rules, that petition will be referred to the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. Thank you. In that case, I now invite the leader, Councillor Douglas, to present her written report, which you will find at agenda item 6 of the council agenda. Standing orders allow 5 minutes for the presentation of the leader's report and 5 minutes for any response by any other group leader.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So today it's with sadness that I ask you, and we start by remembering to celebrate 2 council officer colleagues who have recently passed away. And I'm sure we all send our condolences and best wishes to the family, friends and colleagues of Richard Douglas, Head of Service in the Adult Social Care Team, who had worked for the council for over 25 years, and Beverly Hills, Programmes and Partnership Officer from the Education and Skills Team, who joined the council in 2010. They will both be sorely missed, and we thank them for their service to the council and the people of York. August saw a hugely challenging period nationally with totally unacceptable civil unrest across communities in England. I was proud to see how community representatives, the police and emergency services, elected members, council staff, voluntary sector and residents all worked in support of each other. York is proud of its social justice history, its status as a city of sanctuary and human rights city. Our city showed it will not countenance or tolerate racism, intimidation or violence. And I'd like to thank you all for any positive part you played in events over that period to allow our communities to feel supported. We should all do everything in our power to moderate our language, show a collective rejection of racism and discrimination, and continue to move forward together towards a tolerant and welcome nation. I'd like to thank residents, organisations, businesses and partners across the city for participating in the hugely important public consultation concerning the council's 2025 to 26 budget. Community sessions were run by an independent research firm that led conversations with residents from a range of communities, allowing them to contribute their views on priorities for council spending next year. The financial outlook continues to be exceptionally challenging, with cuts of £10 million per year required to keep a balanced budget and our city solvent, providing opportunities for residents to better understand which services the council must spend its council tax and business rates income on, and which services are discretionary, is an important process that must continue through to budget setting in February 2025. The York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority is now in full swing, and Mayor David Skaith has been in office since early May. and the partnership working between politicians and officers across the combined authority area has already been tremendously productive for the region. York has been awarded funding of £14.4 million so far, with £11 million from the Brownfield Housing Fund and £3.3 million from the Net Zero Fund. 4 additional funds have been set up: the Carbon Negative Challenge Fund, a Vibrant and Sustainable High Streets Fund, a Business Innovation Fund and a Skills Innovation Fund. And early win projects are being brought forward and funded, ready for implementation across the region, all vitally important for assisting York to move forward in delivering on my administration's housing, climate emergency and city infrastructure improvement goals. The exceptional business acumen, skills and commitment to the region of the leaders who applied to join the Combined Authorities Business Board is truly outstanding. And the board will meet soon for the first time and will start providing expert input into creating the local growth plan, supporting existing businesses to grow and innovate, and promoting and creating a thriving startup environment for entrepreneurs. It's a truly exciting time across the region with a range of opportunities that York is tremendously well placed to take advantage of. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the outstanding work that has been going on in children's services, with officers throughout the organisation that have shown exceptional leadership and commitment to drive marked improvements in service delivery and effectiveness. Just one of the changes to ways of working was highlighted in a recent letter from Ofsted. Corporate parenting is completely transformed, with children being the top priority at the corporate centre. Relationships with politicians and multi-agency partners are much improved, and this is reaping benefits for children. This is vitally important work and progress for York's children and young people, and has seen the council coming together as the corporate parents that our children need at a time when they need it most. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
If any of the other group leaders wishes to respond to the leaders' report, can they indicate now? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We support the leaders' comments regarding the events that took place over the summer. The scenes were truly shocking and something I've never experienced in my lifetime. We should be rightly proud of the way our communities responded and supported each other, but must remain vigilant for those small minorities that seek to cause so much trouble. We welcome the leader's acknowledgement of the fantastic work of her predecessors and share her celebration of the Liberal Democrat schemes she has been fortunate to watch come to fruition. The community woodland was a manifesto pledge I suggested in 2017, and thanks go to all the officers and members who made that happen. It was a bold promise to make, but one we delivered. To paraphrase others in the chamber, anyone can make promises, only Liberal Democrats deliver. Similarly, we are pleased to see progress on the circa £18 million of funding we secured for the bus service improvement plan and the electrification of the bus fleet. Bus usage has still not returned to pre-pandemic levels, and we wait to see how this administration will drive up patronage. The recent decision to cut the concessionary fares budget by £200,000 is a worrying step in the wrong direction and sends a confused message. After decades of stagnation, it's great also to see the progress the last administration made on York Central. The latest capital report hints at further delays, which does raise concerns over potential cost overruns and loss of enterprise zone income. Hopefully, the administration's delay approach to delivering major schemes will not infect our key partners. The rest of the capital programme is a glaring omission from this report and was obviously ducked by the administration at the last executive. York Outer Ring Road was listed as being under threat, with government funding brought into question and the council admitting it is reviewing the case. This will be news to the planning inspector, who was clear this was a requirement of delivering a sound local plan. We repeat our call for the executive to commit to delivering the scheme by 2029, as well as delivering Haxby Station, both of which are vital transport links for any plans for new homes north of the city. This is, of course, under the assumption the new government does not proceed to throw York's local plan under the bus before it's even commenced. While we may not have always agreed across the chamber about the rates of growth and greenbelt boundaries, myself and Councillor Merritt have had frequent debates over the last 2 decades on specific issues, We have all always taken an evidence-based approach. Our local plan was crafted over many years on sound evidence and insight. Under proposed reforms, this will be all for nothing under the government's development charter. Your attempt to water down our motion today does send a clear message which side of the resident-developer divide you represent. We do not share the leader's positivity about the housing delivery programme, which has been almost abandoned by this administration. The increase of affordable homes at Ordnance Lane is minimal and unlikely to be delivered this side of our success in May 2027. Worse still, those numbers will be eclipsed by the social housing lost as the administration abandons its principles on sites across the city, be that 22 The Avenues, the Shambles, or even on the leader's own doorstep. Which leaves me to reflect as ever on an update on the delivery of those cast iron pledges. 100% affordable on council-owned land, failed. Neighbourhood caretakers, failed. Free school meals for every child, failed. Retrofit thousands of homes, failed. What this administration has delivered to the people of York is less for more. No promised council tax freeze, instead a maximum increase. Green bin tax, and now perhaps a new residents parking stealth tax. A budget consultation that floats even bigger tax rises to a potential 10%. A national government, now they've finished picking pensioners' pockets, looking at single-person households. In return, people are unable to access their recycling centre and asked to go home and try again another day. Thousands of residents are signing petitions decrying the appalling state of our public realm of videoing rats in our parks. Libraries are faced with closure. Isolated, vulnerable residents are no longer able to visit essential lifelines. Council house delivery is stalled, roads and paths crumble, weeds are thriving. You have been given a unique opportunity with a Labour government, 2 Labour MPs, an elected Labour mayor to truly deliver for the city. Yet all we hear from residents day to day is buyer's remorse. Why did we vote Labour? They're more Tory than the Tories. And with that, I'll hand over to Councillor Stewart, Rowley et al. To offer you their fulsome support in return for nothing at all but general goodwill. Though I would note that since I wrote that, despite a third of his group wearing Labour colours, which is far putting you all to shame, and the decision to move themselves into being the official opposition in front of everybody else, there do appear to be a few little cracks in that relationship.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I take a brave judgment call. There are not thousands of people on the webcast watching this meeting, and therefore this is all a bit of a show and a bit of a pointless show. Therefore, I will not take up too much of people's time. Shall I respond to Councillor Eyre's comments or not? I suppose I shouldn't. It's a bit pointless, isn't it, really? Exactly, yeah. No, I'll keep it brief. As ever, for me, the report seems to focus on the leaders' days out, many of which are good to see, rather than the substantive things about what are going on at the city. We hear about the budget and the consultation, and I wait to see that figure the leader thinks we need from government. We've seen 14 years the Labour Party being absolutely clear we need more money from government. Something has happened in July, and I'm not sure what it is, but the Labour group in York will no longer say that the government needs to send us more money. So really quite unusual. If we could all get behind a figure and get behind asking the government for more money, that would be appreciated. As we've always been told, we need to work for York. And I will just end on 2 positives. Councillor Webb always says after I've spoken, he doesn't understand what I've said at all at full council, and it's often not accurate. So I'll just positively welcome the 2 developments in his directorate in terms of the changes to the staffing in children's, which has gone well, and the work on care leavers, which are both positives and good to read in the report. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, do you wish to say anything in response?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. How can I resist after those comments? Goodness gracious. I think I'll start where we left off. And Councillor Stewart, I'm not sure you actually read my report. The fact that you think that there's nothing in there about what's going on in the council, I'm sorry, but it is absolutely rubbish. And I suppose the other thing that I do that perhaps I know has been a bit of a challenge for the opposition and you to understand is that the city actually wants their leader out there, seeing them, going to events and meeting them. And it is exactly what I do. I can't actually emphasize more the positive response that is receiving and the positivity that it's had around the city. So I just don't really understand your comments about that. And then as far as making the case to government, I don't think we've actually had a quiet moment on that. We've got ministerial visits coming up. We've had one already, which was really welcomed. And I'm writing letters left, right and centre. In fact, I had a reply from the Prime Minister today, which was really good. He read the letter that I sent to him as soon as he got into office, and quite some positive responses on that. So I am doing my bit for York, Councillor Stewart, and please don't imply that I'm not. It doesn't matter to me who the government is. What the people of York need, I will go out there and represent. That's what I'm doing in the combined authority and to government, and also through regional bodies that I belong to. So please don't think that I'm not. And then Councillor Eyre, I think you really need to get a bit of a different script when we come to this meeting, because quite frankly, I'm sure most others in the room think it's the same line that's just repeated every time, and it doesn't really reflect the reality of what is going on in our city. So I really welcome that you're supportive of the community coming together in the summer. I couldn't agree more. That was a really proud moment, I think, for all of us. And I know it was tremendously worrying for many. But I think the city did a fantastic job of supporting our communities to feel valued at that time, which was really important. And I'd like to thank Councillor Kilbane as well for his time and effort that he put in at that point. It was really important. And then rather than fail, I would say we are delivering. We are getting on and we are doing. The speed at which business is coming through the council at the moment. I mean, you came to executive last time. What did we have? 12 action reports on the agenda about housing. We had finance update in there, and I have to say the finances compared to when you were running the show look far better. We've taken the action. We're not using reserves that you frittered away over the years, and we are putting the city back on a financial and stable basis, which I don't think it's seen for a good while. It's still tough, don't get me wrong, it is very tough, but it is looking more optimistic, and that is really important. It's tough times, but we're doing what's necessary, and I will never apologise for that. And as far as making the case to local government for our infrastructure, as I've said to Councillor Stewart, we're out there and we're doing it. We've written letters, we've made approaches already on Haxby Station, on the Outer Ring Road, the local plan. I'm looking forward to seeing that coming through in the coming months. It has been a very long process, and I wonder why. I'm not sure that really the evidence that was used and collected in the first place was quite where it should be in 2018, when the Liberal Democrats put in their application. And that is why we have had round and round and round of hearings, and we are putting it right. We're getting on with it, and we are going to build the houses that the people of York know they need, the infrastructure that they definitely need alongside that. And I just do not recognise the description that you make of your administration. In comparison, we are flying high. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite members to question the leader on her report. The council procedure rules allow 10 minutes for the questions and comments. The leader may respond directly to any question asked or comment made, or may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond to the detail, which will be circulated to all council members within 5 working days. Ooh. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Councillor Stewart has already alluded to, it's pleasing to see the leader's focus on developments in children's services. I welcome the leadership in this area and the role it is playing in improving how we support York's children and young people, especially as corporate parents. How has the council's approach to supporting those in care changed so that it warrants praise from Ofsted?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And yes, it has been really very important and heartwarming to see the improvements in children's services over the past 2 years, and particularly over the past 18 months. And I'd like to thank Martin Kelly and his team for all the work that they've done as well. Councillor Webb has been working very closely alongside them, and particularly around corporate parenting. And we've had improvements in the housing offer that's available to young people as they leave care. We had a paper going through decision-making session with Councillor Webb earlier in the month that means that there will be no longer be a cliff edge on the council tax support that was for just 1 year previously, and now it's phased over 3 years, which was what the young people asked for as care leavers. And I suppose that is really a big part of the improvements, is the care leavers' voice in that, and listening to them, taking into account what they feel that they need and delivering on that for them. And it really is an important function that all of us have who are in this room, who are council employees or councillors, that we are all corporate parents and should be working and thinking about our care leavers, our young people in care, in the same way that we would want for our own children as well. So I'd like to thank you all and encourage you to really take note of what's going on and also how you can support that. Thanks, everybody.
Supplementary, is that supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I just ask my supplementary question, my tie is as blue as I can get it this evening, and my wife will be inconsolable that I'm not allowed to wear the socks that she's given to me today. So take it up with my wife. On a serious note, I commend the leader and the work that Martin Kelly and the executive member are doing with care leavers and with the corporate parenting. I spent 4 years sat on the corporate parenting board, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was an overlarge, overwieldy committee group, and it was quite rightly reduced some 2 years into my tenure on the board. I am saddened that there was no representation from our group on that board. And whilst it's not necessarily a group that has to be kind of limited to numbers or political balance in any way, can I just ask that the leader looks at the possibility of giving a place to ourselves, bearing in mind that corporate parenting, as you have quite rightly said, is all of our responsibility.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rowley, and most certainly we can take that away and have a look at it. I'm more than happy to do that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other supplementaries? Sorry, Councillor Clark, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you behind the bar, so sorry about that.
I realise that. That's why I'm jumping this way rather than this way. But thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I did have a supplementary. What do you see as the council's responsibilities as a corporate parent?
Yeah, I think I may have answered that previously.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, I will say again that we all have our responsibility in that area, and it is to make sure that young people who have come into our care and leave the care of the City of York Council can go off into adult life with the skills, the confidence and the amenities and services that they need to transition into adult life in whatever route that they take. And it is tremendously important that we get that offer for them correct. And the corporate parenting board has representation on there regularly of young people's voice to make sure that we're keeping on top of that and reflecting that in everything that is done. So it's ongoing work and it is tremendously important. Thank you for that question.
I can't see any more supplementary. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Regarding the combined authority item in your report, Leader, it references partnership working between the combined authority, City of York and North Yorkshire councils. If partnership working at senior staff levels is so effective, then why is it necessary to have 3 separate senior staff hierarchies at each authority, costing taxpayers a fortune? Surely the current arrangements offer us the opportunity to investigate and hopefully instigate shared service delivery.
Thanks, Councillor Waters. And yeah, absolutely, it does give the opportunity for shared services, and where it is appropriate and it is to the benefit of both local authorities and the region, then I'm always open to that, and I know other officers are. So there are conversations that are going on around where can that benefit us. But the other thing is that the combined authority doesn't do everything for us. You know, there's many services that quite rightly and will continue to remain in the constituent local authorities. So to think that we can eliminate one element of our ecosystem as it exists now, our political ecosystem, and the different authorities that sit here, I don't think we'll ever necessarily get to that point. But it is really important that we're efficient at the same time, and where it is appropriate that the combined authority leads on certain initiatives and projects that they do. So these, you know, it's early days yet, and the conversations are ongoing, and we may over time see some changes in how our authority and combined authority interact. So I'm quite open to all good ideas on that.
Councillor Waters, do you have a supplementary question? Does anybody else? Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Leader, it's good to hear you mention Haxby Station in your speech, but there was no mention of it. It's a shame that there was no mention of it in your report. The Labour government has pulled support for it. Could you explain what steps you've taken to try and save the Haxby Station project?
Thank you, Councillor Widdowson. I think you'll be really glad to hear that the Labour government hasn't pulled the project at all. It's still on the cards, and Councillor Kilbane, through the combined authority and his role on TFN, etc., is still pushing very hard for that. So it's by no means dead in the water, and it is a really important part of our economic growth plans for the region. I'm sure that many of you have had conversations over the years with North Yorkshire that it is really important to the coastal communities, particularly Scarborough, that we get a half-hourly train service over into York to open up economic opportunity for them. North Yorkshire are very keen on that. So we've been pushing hard to make sure that Haxby Station remains on the plan. We will continue to do that, and so will the Mayor, David Skaith, and also the leadership of North Yorkshire. So it is a joint effort to get that in place because it benefits everybody.
Councillor Widdowson, did you have a supplementary? No. Councillor Eyre.
Just on those discussions with the combined authority.
Supplementary, yeah.
With those discussions on the combined authority, has there been a request to the Mayor to put funding in if necessary? And if so, what quantum of funding is likely to be available?
The first approach is going to be to go for the government funding. So that is really the focus at the moment, is making sure that that business case is absolutely watertight when we go to them on numerous occasions. And I know that Mayor David Skaith has already spoken to the Secretary of State for Transport, Lou Haig, about this very issue. So we're not giving up on the government funding by any means. I think there's a really strong argument for it, and we will have to see where it takes us, and I'll keep you updated as information comes through.
Are there any other supplementaries on this? Right. That concludes the questions. Time's up. I now invite Councillor Douglas to move en bloc the recommendations of the Executive to the Council from the executive meetings held on the 18th of July 2024 and the 12th of September 2024 as contained in the minutes of that meeting set out in the council agenda and agenda supplement.
Moved, Lord Mayor.
May I have a seconder for the recommendations?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now invite debate on any of the recommendations. Please indicate if you wish to speak, and when called upon, say clearly which recommendation you wish to comment upon. I take it that's a no. So I don't suppose Councillor Douglas needs to reply then. I will now take a vote on each of the recommendations. The first vote is on the recommendation in minute 14, which relates to the approval of the capital programme overturn. Voting at this meeting will be by a show of hands unless otherwise indicated. Please raise your hands when I ask in a moment to indicate whether you wish to vote for, against, or abstain in relation to the recommendations. Can I ask you please to keep your hands up for long enough to allow officers to complete the count? All those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hands now.
Unanimous, Lord Mayor.
That's unanimous. Thank you. The recommendation is therefore carried. I will now take a vote on the recommendation in minute 27, which relates to Capital Programme Monitor 1. All those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hands now.
Again, unanimous, Lord Mayor.
That's unanimous. Therefore, the recommendations are carried. Finally, I will now take a vote on the recommendation in minute 35, which relates to Safer York Partnership Community Safety Strategy. All those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hands now.
Again, unanimous, Lord Mayor.
Again, that was unanimous. The recommendations are therefore carried. That concludes the executive recommendations. We now come to the report of the Deputy Leader, and I invite Councillor Kilbane to formally move his written report as set out in the council papers at agenda item 7.
It is the moment we've all been waiting for, Lord Mayor. Well, I have anyway, and I would very happily formally move what could very likely be the last report of the Deputy Leader under this administration to full council.
Thank you. I now invite members to question the Deputy Leader on his report. The council procedure rules allow 10 minutes for questions and comments to the Deputy Leader. The Deputy Leader may respond directly to any question asked or comment made, or may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond in detail, which will be circulated to all council members within 5 working days. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And yes, thank you, Deputy Leader, potentially your last one. But I did want to talk about the work that we did together on Millennium Bridge, improving it to making sure that it is accessible, even in the worst cases of flooding, to make sure that people can travel freely between the best ward in the city of Fishergate and your ward of Micklegate. This had been talked about for ages, ever since the bridge had even been introduced in the year 2000. Could you explain to the council how we work together to get it done and what lessons we've learned to make sure that transport decisions are made quickly in the city?
Thank you, Councillor. I have to admit, I don't really recall any involvement from, sorry, no. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the report as well. I do intend to wax lyrical for a long time about it, just to remind my colleagues here as to why exactly we're going to remove this report, because some of them are threatening to vote to keep it when it comes to the vote. So thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, it was a difficult, as with any floodplain, if you are going to build on it, you normally can't. And if you are going to build on it, you need to provide some compensation for the water that you are displacing. So it was a complicated job. It was botched under the previous administration. I think it was the Green councillor that was in charge of it at the time. The initial spec that was pulled together for it wasn't up to standard, and it progressed quite a long way down the line before it had to be pulled. And I think with these projects, as with this administration, you just have to be on it all the time. Keep on making sure it's top of the agenda. There are difficulties with building these kind of structures, but the huge advantage is we managed to find a solution that the Environment Agency was happy with, that could sign off, and that now means that when the Fishergate, the lovely Fishergate side of the bridge is still accessible, so the Micklegate side of the bridge will be too, because prior to that, we'd have people cycling over from Fishergate suddenly getting their knees wet as they entered into Micklegate. So yeah, it's great to finally get it done. It's been talked about for years, it's been tried for years, and it is an indication of this administration delivering.
Do you have a supplementary? Does anybody have a supplementary? Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can the Deputy Leader tell us what steps the council took and what work he did with local partners at the time of the recent national unrest?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Melly. Obviously, during the right-wing riots that we witnessed in August, it was a very scary time for many people in the city. Also coincided with the leader's annual leave, which meant that I was in charge as far as York is concerned, but working with colleagues in North Yorkshire, with the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. We managed to know what was going on in York and North Yorkshire, and we managed to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Unfortunately, due to the decency, I think, that prevails amongst our residents, the worst didn't happen. I would like to put on record, I know it's in the report, but I would like to put on record my thanks to all of the officers across all of the local authorities and the Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, the work that they did 24 hours a day to stay on top of the situation within our region. Many people went way above and beyond. I would also like to thank the residents who turned out in their hundreds to offer their support and solidarity to communities in our city that were feeling very scared. We had people in our city who feared they would be burnt out of their homes, and I would like to thank the residents who turned up to support those communities and to see off some of the ne'er-do-wells who were hanging around that night. And finally, it would be very remiss of me, especially seeing as how some of our friends from the mosque are in the room tonight, not to thank them for all the work that they did at the height of the worry. The mosque were absolutely brilliant, invited us all down there for tea and biscuits, and there was a lovely, joyful gathering at the mosque. And as I say in my report, the right wing tried to spread fear, instead of which they spread solidarity, they spread hope, they increased friendships between communities, and some of those friendships that were born of that time will be long-lasting and will be for the benefit of our entire city. So thanks to our friends at the mosque for all that they did to reassure the communities in York at that rather worrying time for everybody. The threat hasn't gone away. You know, fascism has reared its ugly head again across Europe, North America. The threat is very much there, and we must be vigilant. We must fight it wherever we find it, as indeed our forebears did.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Melly? No. Does anybody? I can't see any further questions, so I presume you've been very clear, Councillor Kilbane. We now move to agenda item 8 to consider the 4 motions on notice submitted under Standing Order B13. These are included in the list of notices of motions and amendments contained in agenda supplement. As I said earlier, I intend to vary the order and will swap the Labour motions in order to bring forward the community response to Israel-Gaza conflict to be considered first. I now invite Councillor Douglas to move the first motion on community response to Israel-Gaza conflict.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I would like to start this by thanking everyone who's participated in the process of agreeing this wording. It has truly come from our communities and the citizens of York for us all to consider here. The Imam and Rabbi were particularly heavily involved in this process. And it was a really valuable process, I think, for the three of us to sit down that showed mutual respect and consideration under very, very difficult and trying conditions. It was a highly important and compassionate listening process, and it showed a lot of compromise and understanding. And I think we all in the room need to understand that the wording of a motion or a statement that comes from the community is never going to say exactly what we as politicians would say in that situation. It is their wording, it is not our wording. I'd also like to thank group leaders and council officers for their part in this process. I am disappointed that we didn't get to a point of cross-party support, but as always with ambiguity in language, this can cause problems for people. But it is truly coming from the best place for the communities. It is the result of many months of discussion. And so people who spoke tonight and said, why has this taken so long? It is because it was very much a process of nothing about them without them. And we've tried to do that in the most appropriate process that we possibly can. And these things are not easy. And I can reflect to you that of colleagues across the country who have attempted to put something similar together, there is nowhere else that has managed to get all the Jewish and the Muslim, both community and religious leaders in the room together to talk in such a manner. So there will always be ways of wording that are ambiguous and mean things to different people. And we've all said that about what is in front of us. And the last bullet point has been the most challenging for everyone involved. And I'd say everyone. So us in the chamber and the people that were involved in the conversations that I had with them. So that is the immediate release of all Israeli hostages and Palestinian detainees. And it's the word detainees that has been problematic. Now, our collective understanding of the people that had the conversations, so me and the rabbi and the imam, is that that speaks to all civilian people detained in Gaza unlawfully and without trial. And really, you know, we say mainly, of course, that is in Gaza, but it is in Israel too. So these people need to be released and released immediately. We call for an immediate, total and lasting ceasefire and aid to be provided immediately to those who have been and are being impacted by the war. The war must stop. I call on you all to support our communities most heavily affected by the conflict and the citizens of York by supporting this statement and adopting it across the chamber. Thank you.
May I have a seconder?
Formally second, Lord Mayor, and reserve the right.
Notice has been received of an amendment to the motion as set out in the supplementary papers. I now invite Councillor Stewart to move the amendment as set out in the supplementary agenda.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The views of the Conservative group have been consistent in that we view our role at council as to influence what council can influence. That's been on every single issue We've even objected to the lobbying for government policy changes where we don't think we as a council will make a meaningful difference compared to time we could spend doing other things. And that's been exactly our view consistently on every issue, as with this issue. We do not disagree with the comments that people have made today or in previous instances about the horrors that have gone on in the Middle East for years, for decades, for months, however you want to look at it. We do not disagree with the need to get in food, medication. We do not disagree that people in Gaza are really suffering, and we do not disagree with the need to get them help, support, and medication. We've been absolutely clear on that. What we don't believe is that we as a council should be spending our time discussing this any more than we should be discussing what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Sudan, or, for example, as we've heard from one of the public speakers, what's happening in Afghanistan. They're awful, they're horrible, but for us, they're not issues for the council. That said, with this motion on the table, with this motion being talked about, we have been consistently clear for several months we would not be able to agree with the line of all Palestinian detainees being released. And we have consistently said that, and that remains the case. And I think it was probably 5 months ago we first flagged that. We're even prepared to turn a blind eye to the line of a ceasefire based on recent peace proposals, which is highly subjective in terms of which peace proposals are we talking about. You know, it's very, very generic. Turn a blind eye because we want to see a ceasefire. We amended the particular phrase about Palestinian detainees, and we amended that because we can't agree with that. Detainee is viewed by Councillor Douglas, as has been said, to be an ambiguous wording. I don't think it is ambiguous. I mean, a detainee is somebody who is detained. That for me can mean a whole host of different people. That can mean anybody who's been sentenced and imprisoned and sentenced to years and years and decades. But what it absolutely does include is anybody who has not been tried. And I think we would all agree with that. So anybody who's not been subject to a trial. So somebody who was arrested, charged with a mass murder, they would be released under this motion as is. And we can't agree with that. And we've been consistently clear. And I even said to Councillor Douglas months ago, if you look, for example, at the Irish conflict, where prisoners got released, and that was hard for lots of people, I even said we could countenance some wording about working towards a situation where there aren't detainees. Instead, we have come up with this wording, which makes it absolutely clear that people should not be detained if it's not according to international law.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
Can I just, oh, okay.
Can you, well, you can wind up if you like.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Lord Mayor. So on the point that Mr. Murgatroyd made about do we believe Israel is sticking to international law? We even had the point, we even had the point about this is according to international law. So anybody who doesn't think Israel is sticking to international law can still vote for that. So that's why we would urge people to support this amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a seconder?
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. I now invite debate on the amendment. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This motion, as Councillor Douglas has outlined, came from people in the Muslim and Jewish communities in our city. The words in this motion are their words. Whatever we here and now in this chamber might think about those words, and whatever we might think about the proposed amendment, it is not for us to change the words of our residents in the communities who are most affected by what is happening right now. We thank all of those who engaged with and worked hard with Councillor Douglas to agree the wording in the motion. And we, as a group, will vote against the amendment that seeks to change their words.
Nobody else? Councillor Douglas, do you wish to reply?
No, Lord Mayor, thank you.
I will now take a vote on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hands now. Those wishing to vote against the amendment, please raise your hands now. Those wishing to abstain? The result is 19 for the amendment, 24 against. Therefore, the amendment is lost. We now move on to debate on the substantive motion. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Douglas for her hard work, as well as the Imam and the Rabbi in working together to agree the wording of this motion. It's right that the Conservative group's amendment was voted down. Tabling such an amendment was not in the spirit of the work that has been done by our community leaders to agree the wording on the motion, and we hope that the unamended motion will have cross-party support. We have heard the strength of feeling on this matter by our public speakers, both tonight and at previous council meetings. As Councillor Douglas stated, such an important motion needed a well thought through and considered response that united our communities and that community leaders felt best represented all their views. We do appreciate that community members have been frustrated by the length of time this has taken, but this motion ultimately demonstrates our city's desire for an end to the bloodshed. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Hollier.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We're seeing an ongoing humanitarian disaster in Gaza. We're now over 40,000 Palestinians are now estimated to have been killed and vast numbers of life-changing injuries. We're almost a year on from the deplorable October 7th terrorist attacks, which killed over 1,100, with many survivors traumatised, including by the use of sexual violence, and there remains an ongoing hostage situation with over 100 Israelis still held by Hamas. We've seen the displacement of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. The only way to resolve this crisis is not with more bloodshed, but instead a political and diplomatic solution that requires an immediate bilateral ceasefire to stop the killing of innocent Palestinians, the releasing of hostages, allowing for greater access of humanitarian aid and essential supplies into Gaza, restoring UNRWA aid and providing a space to secure a two-state solution along the 1967 borders. The UK government should also uphold the role of international law and international courts. They should respect the ruling that Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal and uphold its findings, introduce legislation to cease trade with illegal Israeli settlements, work to end the arbitrary administrative detention of Palestinians by the IDF, immediately suspend arms sales to Israel, and recognise the threat of Iran and freeze assets owned by Iranian officials. We also need to keep pressing for a two-state solution, and that can only happen if the international community recognises the state of Palestine. We need to wrestle control away from the extremists, get international support for a united, democratically elected Palestinian government, and immediately end the daily violence in Gaza with a ceasefire. Thank you.
Did anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and welcome Councillor Hollier's comments. Look, this is hard, but this is nowhere near hard compared to what people are suffering in the Middle East and have been for a long time. I respect Councillor Stewart's views, but I think we have made it really clear where this motion has come from. And believe me, getting to this point was really difficult with communities that are really hurting. I have some sympathy with the view that councils that make motions that on international events that they can't really affect, what are they doing? So the reason that this took so long is that we very early took the view that what was really important to us in York was, yes, for the slaughter to stop, but also that we held our communities here in York and we held them safe, and we held their confidence in us as an authority. And I've got to say, you know, getting to a form of words, motion's not perfect, nothing's going to be perfect, but getting to that form of words was a difficult process. But through that process, other things have been born between those communities, a deeper understanding locally within those communities, and that's been definitely more valuable than this motion to me. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build peace. We're trying to build peace between people. You know, the leaders of these, the so-called leaders of these countries and these groups who treat other people's lives as things to be dispensed of, they're not going to give us any peace. It's got to come from us, and it's got to come from initiatives from the ground up of people spreading the love and spreading the value that we all put in each other's lives. All of our lives are worth the same. Nobody's life is worth more or less than anybody else's. But, you know, if you're living in Gaza now, you might not be believing that given what's happening to you. So we've got to spread that love. We've got to spread those values. And we thought the best way to try and do that, and our local communities agreed to go on that journey, is to try and start doing that in York. So hopefully this is the start of something that will continue. It will include all of the thoughts and views that were expressed earlier by public speakers. They're all on the table to be discussed amongst us in our communities as we work out the best way forward. Yes, to show solidarity with the people who are being slaughtered in the Middle East, but also to really show solidarity and support our local communities. And I thank them for the work that they've done and the journey, the hard yards that they've done to get here. And for that reason, we had to leave this motion well alone, because it's got us to a certain place that is a good place in York, which we need to build on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, I ran out of time when making my case, and I think the 30-second rebuttal from Councillor Wilson and 30-second rebuttal from Councillor Lomas weren't exactly the most incisive and tangible contributions I've heard. For me, you know, it does remain a quite straightforward case in terms of the wording we sought to change, and I would fundamentally say the motion as is still, you know, for that very reason, which we have sought for months to change quite specifically, is why we can't support it and will abstain on the substantive motion. And I do think it's a great shame that the Labour group has now got this line that it simply cannot be changed. When Labour asked me to keep them informed of how we might amend the motion, so they could see. When Labour said they were okay with the amendment, when Labour met to discuss the amendment, and now we're told by Labour it could never be amended. Because also the fact it could never be amended is based on this view that the Muslim community is binary and the Jewish community is binary, and the imam and the rabbi speak for them. And I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that's helpful if we're going to work together as a city to say that that is the voice of Muslims and that is the voice of Jewish people. So I think and also it's a Labour Party motion in the name of Councillor Douglas. It is not quoting an agreement between other people. So that's why we won't be supporting the motion, because of the wording as is on detainees, which is quite clear, unfortunately.
Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to correct something that Councillor Stewart said. None of us have said that wording in the motion could never be changed. I didn't say that. Councillor Wilson didn't say that. Councillor Douglas hasn't said that. Councillor Kilbane didn't say that. That is an assumption made by Councillor Stewart. And in fact, I can confirm that on receiving the wording of the amendment that the Conservative group wished to propose, Councillor Douglas did attempt to go back and re-engage with all of the people who'd worked so hard over so many months on this process. But unfortunately, there wasn't sufficient time at that point to agree through them, with them, any changes to the wording. So it's simply factually untrue to say that we are taking a position that the wording could never be changed. We absolutely will listen to anyone who wants to change something. But there's a way to do that, and we simply set out our principles that this was something that had to be done with and through the communities who are affected most. And we've held that line, and we've held that line this evening, and we encourage all councillors to vote for this amendment to show our solidarity with the communities, sorry, motion, not amendment, to show our solidarity with the communities in York who are most affected by what we've all been discussing about what's going on in Gaza at the moment.
Did anybody else wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Douglas, do you wish to reply?
No, Lord Mayor.
I will now take a vote on the motion. If you wish to vote for the motion, please raise your hands now. All those against?
Zero, Lord Mayor.
Any abstentions? The result is 40 for the motion and 3 abstentions. The motion is therefore carried. I think at this point we will take a 15-minute break. Thank you. Thank you, members, and welcome back. If we move on to the next motion, it's the York Local Plan. I now invite Councillor Eyre to present the second motion, which relates to York's local plan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I propose a motion, I would like to seek the acceptance of council to accept Councillor Rowley's amendment to the motion. This has nothing to do with socks. The socks I'm wearing are Christmas socks because that's all I could find in the cupboard.
Right. Okay, then can we have a vote on whether or not council accepts the amendment? All those in favour?
Appears to be unanimous, Lord Mayor. But rather shortcuts,
Well, thank you for that. That was unanimous, and now I've got to find my way in the script. So thank you.
Essentially, we're now at a point where
Right, Councillor Eyre, can you continue, please? Sorry about that.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and apologies for confusing matters. As Liberal Democrats, we support delivering more homes and making homes more affordable. Our national manifesto went the furthest in terms of housing delivery of all the main parties. We support house building nationally and we support house building locally. In my working life alone, the housing market has run out of control. That is a result of the policies of all parties at a national level. What we have always set out to do is to deliver the homes that York needs while also maintaining the special character and setting of this truly unique city. We are custodians of that legacy for a short while, but the decisions we make will have a lasting impact. That is why so much time has been invested in developing our draft local plan. When first elected in 2007, we had inherited a housing target of 850 homes per annum. Since that time, proposals have ranged from a low growth figure below 600 to a high growth figure of around 1,000. These two figures probably represent the two philosophical ends of the spectrum. Our local plan chose to be driven purely by the independent evidence. That is not to say everyone in our party, or for that matter, I suspect Councillor Stewart's party, were 100% happy with either that evidence or the direction it led, but we put politics aside to deliver a local plan for the city. That evidence was robustly challenged in the examination phase. The planning inspector himself questioned whether those figures were too high, even suggesting the high rate of growth may be enough to render the plan unsound and in need of withdrawal. In response to that challenge, we commissioned experts to assess our delivery, and that is the evidence I reflect on today. There were three key elements to that independent analysis. First and foremost is the housing need for the current and future population of this city. While population projections do fluctuate, and there is inherent danger in locking in one particular prediction, even allowing for this provides a range from 380 to 580 new homes per annum. Using the approach suggested by the local plan experts group nationally, that figure is 482. Second is that under forecast population growth, there would not be the level of household growth required to fill the number of homes delivered by the local plan. The plan is based on significant increases in migration to the city to generate sufficient population for 822 additional homes each year. This is a target of 13,200 people, more than double the predicted growth of 6,200. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the need for affordable housing does not generally lead to a need to increase overall provision. That despite the level of need being high, this does not point to any requirement for the council to further increase housing requirements. That a key issue is access to capital as well as mortgage restrictions, rather than simply the cost of housing to buy. What is clear from the evidence is that the local plan was always ambitious. It was never a NIMBY charter. It delivers the housing needed for the residents of York, for their children, and seeks to attract an additional 7,000 new residents to drive our economic growth. This is done in a planned way, ensuring infrastructure keeps pace with delivery. It goes into detail to assess our greenbelt and where it needs protection, ensuring these boundaries can last for 25 years. What the NPPF proposals do is drive a coach and horses through these plans. It rips up protection of all greenbelt sites in the city and the wider county. It puts developers in charge and leaves residents and experienced officers muted. Worst of all, it won't work. Developers' interests are primarily in land valuation and house prices, not in oversupplying to drive down their commodity price. The NPPF consultation states that London's current housing target is 4 times its average annual delivery, and this simply can't be right. So why is it right for York? York has only once ever achieved housing delivery over 1,000 units a year at Hungate. No one believes the city can ramp delivery up to the 1,500 that will be required. What is therefore achieved? Well, Greenbelt is lost, land is banked, and the housing market continues to deliver in the best interest of those who hold all the cards. What is needed to get the country building is a sensible conversation about planning reform, not a rushed botched consultation aimed at shifting housing delivery from one place to another with no clear rhyme or reason. I call on everyone here to stand by their promise to the electorate only 18 months ago and ensure that land included in our local plan as Greenbelt remains so and is respected as such for 25 years in the plan. I urge you to support the motion as proposed.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Cuthbertson. No? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I can't see where I'm looking.
It's okay, Lord Mayor. Been there, understand the situation.
Councillor Orrell, thank you very much and I apologise.
I'm pleased to second this important motion. As Councillor Eyre said, we all want more houses to be built. Liberal Democrats believe development should involve the local community. There are 2 developments in our area about to happen. The first went through our local plan process that involved consultations with our local community. It was accepted by local people through our neighbourhood plan, and the school local people wanted is to be provided. The people of Huntington are not blockers. The other development was imposed by government diktat, against the provisions of the local plan, against the overwhelming opposition of local people. The result is that the development is resented at a level we've never known before. Our council now has a duty to strictly enforce the planning conditions to protect local people for the several years it will take to build. So the people of Huntington are not NIMBYs or blockers and will support housing developments in the right place. But make no apology for opposing developments that are not community-led. Final thought. Many so-called housing experts keep saying that if only councils would pass more planning applications, many more houses will be supplied, making homes more affordable. It won't happen. As Councillor Eyre has mentioned, developers have their own definition of supply and demand. They'll supply the houses if they can demand the price they want. If they can't demand that price, they won't build, as has happened many times before. And as Councillor mentioned, since Brexit, there is no longer the capacity to escalate house building, and supply and demand does work in this area. Labour costs increase, so houses are more expensive. The people of Huntington, our city, deserve your support for this motion unamended.
Thank you, Councillor Orrell. Notice has been received of another amendment. Before considering this substantive motion, I now invite Councillor Burton to move the amendment as set out in the supplementary agenda.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I get into what I've prepared, I just want to touch on this idea of how we deliver these homes and the fact that they can't be delivered. Actually, what's changed over the years is that historically we've produced a much higher amount of council housing and affordable housing, and that's what built up our housing numbers. I actually think I'd agree with you that we're not going to replace this by building loads more private homes through the developer sector. But actually what Labour's talking about at a national level is more council housing and more affordable housing to fill that gap. And that's the only way that you'll build this number of homes that they're talking about. So yeah, I agree with you. It'll only work through building more affordable homes, essentially. This amendment's been brought forward to tackle several contradictions in the original. As the original motion notes, there was cross-party agreement during the election that the UK needs a vast increase in housing delivery. The Liberal Democrat manifesto proposed 380,000 new homes a year, 30,000 more than even the new government's ambitious targets. For context, since 2010, the UK has completed on average just 174,000 new homes a year. As a country, we've been vastly under-delivering. The Centre for Cities compared the housing completion rates of our European neighbours versus the UK between 1955 and 2015. If we were to have kept pace with them, we would have built over 4 million additional homes in that time. The impact of this failure on our city is clear: low affordability, homelessness, labour shortages, and poverty for people who actually make good incomes because of the amount they're paying for rent and homes. Nearly everything is affected by the ongoing housing crisis here. The original motion claims that the draft local plan meets our housing need. In fact, as this amendment states, it was actually identified in the process that we actually need 9,396 affordable homes in the same plan period, which is more than the total homes proposed in the plan. The figures don't indicate an entirely sound local plan, but instead a national planning system that has historically failed to deliver the number of homes that we need. The NPPF needs significant reform, and that's what the government is proposing here, and that's what's being consulted on at the moment. Second contradiction is that the original motion insinuates that the Lib Dem local plan protects the green belt. In fact, many of the new proposed homes are what most people would have previously called green belt. That's the name of the game. This much more housing requires more land. It would be disingenuous to pretend that the national Lib Dem figure of 380,000 new homes could be achieved without encroaching on the green belt too. We're choosing to put in this amendment because there is still some agreement with the original motion. The council will put forward a strong response to the NPPF and ensure development is sustainable. It's vital that any future local plan is considerate of this. In addition, we also agree that the housing issues are not just a matter of supply, and market intervention is required on a whole raft of issues, including short-term lets. However, we must support this amendment to reflect the reality that current UK housing numbers are entirely inadequate, and that is exactly what this new government is boldly doing at the national level. Thanks.
I now invite debate on, sorry. Can I have a seconder?
Second the amendment and reserves the right.
Thank you. I now invite debate on the amendments. Councillor Smalley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The current draft local plan has given certainty to communities and businesses in York and the surrounding villages that we as a city want to grow, build a vibrant economy that attracts skilled workers to live and build a life in the city. It provides the housing and infrastructure needed to manage that growth. The process has at times been a painful one for many residents across the city. However, because the previous administration engaged early and often throughout the process and committed to building the necessary transport, health, education, and green infrastructure alongside housing, residents accepted that plan. What we do not need to do is tarnish the good cross-party work done on that plan by ripping it up. Council, this amendment is a wrecking amendment. I should know, I've drafted a fair few in my time. This amendment would mean that the council endorses more greenbelt land be opened up for housing with little guarantee that this will be done in a managed way or with the necessary infrastructure. All this will do is whittle away the public support for existing planned housing, slow down the planning and construction process, and send a signal to developers that the market is about to be flooded by housing. The result of this will be counterproductive to our house building efforts, as developers will simply restrict their supply of housing and slow down their constructions of homes in York in order to retain their profit margins. Providing certainty that we have a 25-year local plan and that we're going to stick to it would allow us to get on and build the right homes in the right places. The government is forcing northern local authorities to have higher housing targets whilst cutting the targets for London, all without tackling the root causes within the housing sector. Developers' land bank, and that should be tackled by introducing use it or lose it planning permission. There should be restrictions on short-term lets and second homes. We do not currently have the skilled workforce to build the homes we need, and we should be investing in skills, apprenticeships and jobs in the construction sector. Council, a central planning diktat from government without being backed by meaningful reform will not result in a single extra affordable home being built in York. Vote against this wrecking amendment.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to debate this? No. Councillor, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If Councillor Burton wanted to bring forward a motion on the local plan, the NPPF, the Green Belt or York's future housing need, he had every opportunity to do so. We don't believe it's acceptable, nor in our opinion constitutional, instead, for clear wrecking amendments such as these to be brought forward. Some amendments are little more than petty party politics. We could waste time debating the tone of the planning inspector's letter of 2020, or even 2018 or 2019. The number of homes proposed in the Greenbelt is a matter of record, and the release of such land was referenced in my moving of the motion. Some amendments are minor additions, which we could probably have accepted without the debate had they been brought to us. Some, however, are misleading. The causal link drawn between affordable housing and increased housing delivery targets was addressed in moving the motion and is not a single straightforward matter. Our own evidence base is clear that, quote, overall, it is difficult to link the need for affordable housing to the overall housing need. Indeed, there is no justification for trying to make the link. Put simply, the two do not measure the same thing. This evidence base also posits a potentially much lower requirement for affordable homes, around 4,000 homes lower than this amendment suggests. This is a hugely complicated area and precisely why it was not included as part of the original motion. The amendment to the first bullet point under resolves simply negates the whole point of the motion, which is to support the evidence base and housing target within the local plan. If you don't agree with that evidence, it's fine, vote against the motion. Stand up and outline to the public what you support and how you will bring about plans to locate over 3 times the Greenbelt land currently identified for development. Let's be clear, as this amendment does suggest, 7,500 homes are currently proposed to be removed from the Greenbelt because there are no other brownfield sites. The new method adds potentially another 17,000. That's over 3 times the Greenbelt taken out under the current plan. And that's not counting comments by the new mayor that further Greenbelt land may go to assist with North Yorkshire's targets. The second bullet point appears to be a request from Councillor Pavlovic to row back on his previous commitment, which we did think was questionable at the time. However, that was another of his and his group's cast iron promises. So if it wasn't correct at the time, perhaps an apology is called for. We've become quite accustomed to a Labour administration that says one thing and means another, so perhaps we shouldn't have been so surprised. The reference to otherwise allowed for appears nothing more than just a blank canvas to commit to protecting nothing, given any plan is subject to constant review. The point of this motion was to commit this council to our evidence-based housing requirements and our evidence-based Greenbelt boundaries. This amendment wrecks both of those intentions. It should have been ruled out of order, and it certainly shouldn't be supported.
Thank you. I will now take a vote on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hand now.
Yeah, so that's 24, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. If you wish to vote against the amendment, please raise your hand now. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Right, that's 24 for the amendment and 20 against. The amendment is passed. Apologies. We've had a recount. You've been shuffling. There was 23 in favour and 20 against. It's still carried. We now move to debate on the substantive motion as amended. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Members will find the revised substantive motion included in the supplementary papers that have been submitted. Yeah, members will find the revised substantive motion set out in the agenda papers, and particularly in the supplementary pack number 2, which has been published on the website.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. That's
Point
not
of-
strictly true, because we accepted Councillor Rowley's amendment. So the one that's in the papers and on the website isn't the final. It's a double amended motion now.
It is indeed a double amended motion. It will now be for the Labour Group to explain how they are going to deal with any conflicts that arise as a result of both amendments being accepted.
Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We don't feel that there are any contradictions. The inclusion of the counting of student housing numbers is not incompatible with the amendment that we've submitted and that's now been adopted.
So if I may, Lord Mayor, the new substantive motion will be that which is set out at page 10, partway down page 10 of the second agenda supplement, with the addition of the words contained in the Conservative amendment, which is at page 7 of that document, which includes the response should urge the government to reassess the way in which student housing is deemed to meet housing demand, given the many logical differences between the two supplies. So that would be as part of the first resolution.
Councillor
I hate to be a pain, but Councillor Healy has pointed out that part of our bit has been taken out by that amendment, so it now doesn't make any sense, I don't think. Because the Conservative amendment ends at the full stop after plan. The full stop after plan no longer exists in the amended motion.
Consultation referring to the above express support for only.
Yeah, it's just an adjunct to the end of the. It's an adjunct to the end of the. Yeah. Yeah. So as I say, Lord Mayor, my view would be that the additional wording included in the Conservative amendment can simply be added to the end of that first bullet point in the finally amended motion, which is now to be debated as substantive. So it would read, to ask the Executive Member for Housing, Planning and Safer Communities to approve a council response to the government consultation referred to above, which expresses support for annual housing targets, including affordable housing targets that are based on evidenced need, including latest household formation figures. The semicolon, the response should urge the government to reassess the way in which student housing is deemed to meet housing demand, given the many logical differences between the two supplies. That would then be the substantive motion that the floor is debating.
So I now, are you? You want to say? Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It seems as though I'm the only one that wants to speak on the amended motion. And I'd like to thank you, and I've listened to tonight's debate on this motion with interest, albeit I'm slightly nonplussed as to why it's here, other than to show up the Lib Dems for the contradiction between their national party and their local representatives. If that was the intention, then I thank Councillor Eyre for his magnanimity in advertising his and his local party's hypocrisy around house building. The National Party wants to build 380,000 more homes, just not in York. If ever there was a definition of NIMBY, it's encapsulated within their comments. And lest anyone forgets, the target of 822 homes per year is their target, set when they were in coalition with the Tories, and then reinforced when they were the largest party until May 23, including 7,500 in the Greenbelt. Due to the methodology adopted, unique to York, they adopted the figure of 822, comprised of the household projections from 2012, plus crucially projections for economic growth and their chronic under-delivery of housing in previous years, which when the inspectors asked York if it wanted to revise in 2020, when the new methodology was issued, Councillor Nigel Eyre, yes, the same Nigel Eyre as executive member for the local plan, that is now questioning the numbers through this motion, mentioning 482 as being the accurate figure, robustly argued that the figures were correct and evidence based on economic growth projections. So the same party that no longer believes in their own local plan housing numbers also doesn't want to see economic growth in the city or the housing to support it. Where they're right is that there are 9,000 homes in York that have planning permission that haven't been built yet. They should have been, and we agree that there should be a use it or lose it power. We also need to look to restrict short-term holiday lets that take homes from local residents. And it is time that we looked at right to buy. And it's fantastic that this new government won't shy away from legislating into these areas. So despite the Lib Dem manifesto pledge to expand the rate of house building and the local Lib Dems doing all in their power to restrict it, this government and this local party are on the side of York, its future prosperity, and most of all, its people who need housing and need it now. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's been that long, I forgot that I moved the motion. I don't know what's that particular process. Yeah. We have to have a lot of bingo when we come to council meetings, and on Councillor Pavlovic bingo, I will always put in non-plus as his introductory comments. It seems to be the thing he says at most meetings I've been through. Well, generally is because you don't appear to have actually read the motion, the information, or listened to any of the debate. Nobody has said that we don't believe in building in York. It's right there in the motion, 822. It's over 20,000 homes over the lifetime of the plan. That's not in York. That's 20,000 plus homes in York. It's not NIMBYism. I never said in this motion, nobody has ever said in these speeches that we don't believe in those housing numbers. I've stood here and robustly defended them the same way as I defended them at the time. I believe in those numbers. What I tried to explain to you today is the difference between the demographic growth, which is around about 420, and the larger economic level growth of 822. That's the point that I made. The question we're debating now is not the local plan housing numbers, it's whether it's right to then take an extra further addition on top of that. I didn't even get into mentioning, because it's more complicated, it's more than 822. It's actually over 1,000 because there are mechanisms in there to deal with under delivery over the time. So it's significantly more than 820. That is the fact of what's actually in the motion. That's what we're asking you to support. We're not saying it's the usual straw man argument that you put forward for the Liberal Democrats. Oh, you said this. No, we didn't. We didn't say we don't support the local plan housing targets. We're literally asking you to support those targets that were so expertly put together by ourselves and the Conservatives when they were our junior partners. I think I mentioned in one of these things, because he just said the Lib Dem led local plan at the time. And it was actually, I think you made a point of saying Conservative led in every single statement that you and Councillor Rawlings at the time ever made. So don't misrepresent the argument. Don't argue something you think you can win when it doesn't actually exist around this table here today. The fact is, you said you would stick by those numbers. Those numbers are the evidence base. Those numbers are the need. Those numbers are the ones that officers believe. They're very difficult to deliver. That's the point that secondly I was making, is even at those local plan figures, it will be hugely challenging to ramp up delivery to hit those. Putting another 500 on top of that, announcing 1,500 and basically writing a charter that says York will never meet its 5-year housing target at 1,500. So any application that comes in the Greenbelt will naturally be approved. That is what is being proposed. That's the risk. That's the concerns officers and members have. A loss of planning control, a loss of actual thought process and strategic planning in this city.
Thank you. I will now take a vote on the motion as amended. All those wishing to vote for the motion as amended, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those wishing to vote against the motion as amended, please raise your hand now. All those wishing to abstain, please raise your hand. That's 27 for 26 for the motion as amended, none against and 17 abstentions. Therefore, the motion as amended is carried. I now invite Councillor Whitcroft to move the third motion, which relates to reforming residents' priority parking.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not sure if I can still call myself a newly elected councillor, but having been in this role for over a year now, it's become increasingly clear to me that our residents' parking system here in York is broken and we have to fix it. I've worked with a number of residents' associations and local people who are desperate to have residents parking in their streets, but they can't get it. In particular, my ward of Fishergate has some of the closest free parking to the city centre. It clogs our residential areas with cars from commuters, tourists, and people from other areas of the city. Fishergate's residents need access to parking in their own streets, but they've been pushed out. From Broadway to Fishergate Bar, residents have had enough. I'd like to bring to your attention the particular case of Farrar Street. Farrar Street is one of the worst hit by this parking problem. Just off Lawrence Street and a stone's throw from Warmgate Bar, Farrar Street is a friendly neighbourhood where long-term residents live happily alongside students and visiting tourists. I was proud to submit their petition for Res Park, but I was shocked to learn that this was their second attempt in 5 years. Their last effort to get Res Park failed after a previous vote had fallen foul of a unique and infuriating rule. In order to get Res Park, a minimum of 50% of the street's properties must take part in a consultation, and a majority of those must say they want Res Park. Farrar Street's last consultation took place in the aftermath of lockdown, but enduring restrictions and the absence of student residents meant that turnout was suppressed, and even though they had the most votes, the consultation failed. And so Farrar Street and many other streets in Fishergate and across the city are stuck in a doom loop of endless applications without ever getting what they need. I first met the members of the Farrar Street Residents Association when I was out campaigning, and I discovered that they were doing exactly the same thing, gathering signatures for their residents' parking petition. One of my first acts as councillor was to submit that petition on their behalf. But 1 year on, a consultation has still not yet been organised. This made me realise that our system of implementing Res Park is broken and this needs to be solved. I hope that this motion will do that. Crucially, residents should not be expected to undertake such an arduous process just to have the right to park near their home. The Res Park petition I introduced in Farrar Street included the names of people from all backgrounds, including students, long seen as the traditional enemy of Res Park. A significant number of students put their names to the petition, having had enough of their street being log jammed. I hope this will serve as an example to other councillors in predominantly student areas that many students do also want Res Park and can be encouraged to support it. The problem of parking in Farrar Street has persisted for decades. The street even appeared on online forums for those wanting to visit our city, but not wanting to pay the parking charges. But it doesn't matter what street it is or where in the city it happens to be. If residents cannot park safely and consistently near their homes, then the transport system has failed them. Our administration regularly speaks out about improving access to the city centre. I'm proud of us for doing so. I want to take that same energy and give people the right to park near their own homes. In addition, Res Park's current street-by-street approach with its long consultations and piecemeal delivery does not reflect the real needs of a transport system in a modern city. Residents who may not want Res Park will often change their mind when a neighbouring street decides to adopt it, and cars searching for free parking chase an ever smaller number of spaces. An implementation strategy of the kind we currently have does nothing for residents, for drivers, or people who want to see York adopt a more sustainable transport route. When we have made such an effort to build a transport plan by working not just cross-party, but across the city as well, the council's hands are tied on this most important of issues. The issue with turnout brings me to another wider point I often make about Res Park. Why is it that such an important transport policy decision is left to a piecemeal street-by-street approval system when what we really need is a joined-up plan? Every other transport decision is made at an executive level or at a council level. No matter how sweeping or transformative, why not Res Park? And why is it that when council elections, parliamentary elections, national referenda, parish council elections, town council elections have no turnout requirements, Res Park consultations are the one exception, often with its debilitating 50% turnout rule. Indeed, if we were to apply those same rules to our own elections as councillors here, only one councillor would even be sat in the chamber here today, Councillor Nichols of Bishopthorpe. You yourself are the only person that got more than 50% turnout in your ward. Congratulations. But we wouldn't want him getting lonely here in the chamber on his own. And in fact, sorry, Councillor Nichols, but given that you didn't actually get 50% plus one of the votes in Bishopthorpe, perhaps none of us would be here, Lord Mayor. It would be an empty chamber. And I'm sure council officers would have no idea what to do without us. Previous administrations and Fishergate councillors have failed. They have failed to act on building a parking strategy that works for our residents. I'm not going to let us follow them. The residents of Farrar Street, of Fishergate and across the city are standing up to make their voices heard, and we should listen. Above all else, York should be run for the people that live here. I urge you to approve the motion and get rid of a restrictive and outdated parking policy. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
May I have a seconder? Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to be seconding this motion, supporting my neighbouring ward colleagues of Fishergate and flying the flag for Res Park. Representing a ward that has Res Park, I know all too well the uphill battle residents and councillors have to go through just to be able to park on their own street, which is an accessibility issue in itself. I commend Badger Hill Residents Community Group and the Hull Road South West Residents Association for feeding into the work and ensuring that they got Res Park. Under the current structure, the process is lengthy and confusing. In my ward of Hull Road, I know residents' frustrations, particularly in the Garrow Hill area, that due to complications was not brought under the Res Park scheme when it was introduced. The road is now, much like Farrar Street, used as a free-for-all, with residents being unable to park outside their own homes. This motion and reform is long overdue, and I'm pleased to see it is progressing under this Labour administration and look forward to working with Councillor Avilius on this issue. While I recognise the issues around parking across the city, including Councillor Rowley and Councillor Waters' infamous Tranviav, I echo Councillor Whitcroft's words that it is positive to see students engaging in the Res Park process and with fellow residents, and would encourage this across the city. It is a credit to the previous Hull Road councillors that they persisted, and officers who I'm sure were pestered by Councillor Pavlovic, that we got this in my ward, but it should be much easier. I know the Lib Dems have a habit of adding the word tax to just about everything nowadays, but that is not what Res Park is. Residents want a system that puts them first, and that's what this motion does. I look forward to seeing this Labour administration continue to deliver for the people of York, and would urge all councillors to support this much needed reform to Res Park. Thank you.
I now invite debate on the motion. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. I believe this is a timely motion, which relates to an issue which I know features heavily in the caseload of many councillors, namely parking. In my ward, I currently have just one res park zone, but there is a live debate in some other parts of the ward about how to address issues arising from increased on-street parking by commuters and staff from local employers, whether it's limited or no on-site parking. The issues raised by residents relate mainly to road safety, such as parking on blind bends or on footpaths or across driveways, rather than necessarily residents being unable to park near their home. It may well be that the weight of local opinion will point towards res park as the best way to address these problems, but that needs to be the product of engagement and consultation with residents. The motion doesn't mention tackling the cause of problem parking in some areas, which is primarily people choosing to drive rather than use other forms of transport, such as park and ride buses or cycling. In any review of res park, I would like to see this as something that would need to be central to that work. I'm sure there are ways to make the current process for consulting and balloting on res park schemes more efficient, and it would be helpful to have more clarity around the actual cost of the scheme and how this relates to the fees paid by residents. And it would be great to see increased car club provision. And I recently had a trip out with some colleagues from Enterprise to look at potential parking locations around my ward. So I welcome the inclusion of that in the motion. If this motion was about those things, that would be absolutely fine. It would have my support. But the motion goes further than that. It requires a plan to be developed to expand res park, with no mention of this being subject to appropriate consultation with affected communities. Such an expansion, which would presumably be organised and coordinated from the centre, is not something I can support as currently worded. Res park may well be the best solution to address parking and road safety issues in my ward and in other wards, but I believe that an expansion of res park in the way that's envisaged here would not be appropriate. So I'm therefore, with some degree of regret, unable to support this motion. I do hope this can be the start of a conversation rather than the end of it, and without prejudging what the Economy, Place, Access and Transport Scrutiny Committee might have in mind, it may well be an issue that they would wish to be involved in going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To quote Councillor Eyre, quoting Councillor Pavlovic, I think we're very much nonplussed by this motion. I do get the issue. I do understand the issue, and I do understand it's an issue for Councillor Whitcross residents. He's undoubtedly worked hard on it. The problem for us is the motion doesn't ultimately say a great deal. And I think it's the problem when you are the administration, you're writing a motion. Yes, we want to streamline consultation. We want less bureaucratic processes, but tangibly, there's next to nothing here. We're even told that we want fairer pricing, reviewing the pricing structure to get fairer pricing for residents. No idea what that means. No idea what the place to. I assume it's meant to mean lower prices for those in residents' parking zones. But this is an issue of particular parts of the city. It's not an issue at all in any way for Cottonthorpe, which should be the primary driver when we look at things. And indeed, as Councillor Fenton has said, the issues, I think, are things about parking on corners, all sorts of things like that. I haven't been able to get in the last 6 months some slow markings painted on a road where we're blighted by lorries due to the Bishopthorpe Bridge closure. A simple bit of painting, been banging away, trying to get it. Literally, that hasn't been done. Okay, that's the sort of thing we need. We need some of these solutions rather than a citywide review of res park, because that will cost money and we've got finite resources, and we do not need a citywide review of res park. We need to look at particular areas where we have a particular problem. The final reason that we won't be supporting this motion is what we regard as the inherently flawed line in it. And we as a group do take the view, the very old-fashioned view, that the motion should be something we're agreeing to and adhering to, rather than just something to file away and put on a leaflet. And that's the line which says all residents in the City of York boundary should have equitable access to car parking, and ideally also club shares near car club schemes near to their homes. We absolutely want to see more car clubs, definitely, without any doubt whatsoever. We think that'll be a positive development, want to see that. But all residents should have equitable access to car parking. Now, I appreciate equitable is not equal. They're not the same, but equitable is very, very close to equal. And that must clearly be saying that if you live in the city centre, you have the same rights to expect car parking as if you live in a village. And that just doesn't make sense. We need to have as much disabled parking as is going to be needed. I absolutely agree with that for residents where applicable.
20 seconds.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. But the idea that people living in the city centre are not making some sort of trade-off, and when we've got all the local transport strategy about cutting car use, this is totally at odds with that. Totally at odds with that, to be saying that people have this absolute right to car parking. If we're going to move away from this, things like this do have to get harder in some cases. And I'd be interested in Councillor Villiers' views on this.
Councillor Bassey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I keep waiting to see carts being pushed down the road by horses, even in old films. But the reality is that the horse always comes before the cart. Councillor Whitcroft spoke eloquently about joined-up thinking, and I agree with him. And I know that Councillor Villiers will understand the point I'm going to make. Joined-up thinking is about seeing everything in the round. If you want to reduce parking, if you want to reduce people coming into York and using the side streets, then what you need to do is to address the major infrastructure problems that we have in our city. We have to have decent public transport, viable cycle paths. We've got to have alternatives that people can use. And relentlessly trying to punish people out of their cars, or punish one group of people out of their cars while benefiting another group, as Councillor Stewart says, doesn't seem to me to be a vehicle, if I can mix my metaphors, for solving things. So if we're serious, please come back and I will listen to a coherent plan that puts parking in the context of all the other things that we need with transport, rather than just trying to address one little part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is quite an interesting debate, actually, because I think Councillor Stewart's on whether this will sit on a shelf, as you said. I'm pretty certain Councillor Whitcroft's not going to allow that. So that's one thing. But it's become a bit of a debate on political principles, really. I think, you've got the proposer of the motion suggesting we need order, we need a bit of planning, we need a joined up approach, or we've got a liberal free-for-all. And I think that, speaking as a Heworth councillor, representing a near city centre ward, I'm particularly like the bit in this motion that relates to sort of the efficiency of this practice. In my ward, we've got Dodsworth Avenue area, the Huntington Road area, both have petitions in at the moment and are in different stages of that process. And both areas are sort of essentially right next to each other. And it's become a very, very complicated process. We've got issues on Dodsworth Avenue, for example, where commuter parking is building up so much that buses can't get through the streets, that ambulances are struggling to get through, and that actually there has been reports of people driving onto the pavement to get around commuter parking. This is where, and I regularly get told this, people are parking up on a side street, they're pulling their little Brompton bike out the back, and then they're driving into the city rather than making use of park and ride. And I think that that's something that could be addressed by a reform to this approach. The last point I'll make is at the weekend, myself and Councillor Burton were down on Huntington Road, and I was talking to residents there about the idea of Res Park, and one resident raised the issue that they work nights, and when they get home after a night shift, they just want to be able to park outside their house and go to bed, right? And actually, in the current system, we can't get Res Park quick enough, we can't get this appropriate enough, and it can't be solved under these current rules. So I actually think this motion is a really, really timely one. I think it fits with our transport policies, and I do believe that it does give a bit of order to what currently is, as I say, a liberal free-for-all. So hopefully we can see an improvement by following the points within this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Revilius.
Thank you. Yes, I'm finding this a really fascinating debate. I think I'm not going to talk at length about this, but what I would like to say is that a review to Res Park needs to go hand in hand with developing a parking strategy. Currently, we don't have a clear parking strategy for the city. We need a consistent offer. When Councillor Stewart talked about not being able to get white lines in a certain area or bits of corner that get parked on, it's because we don't have a consistency across the city about where it's appropriate to park and where it's not appropriate to park. We don't have consistent pricing. So we've got to do that parking strategy at the same time as the Res Park. And the parking strategy needs to be thinking about how we make best use of the highway. The highway is not just a place for parking cars. In some cases, it needs to be a place where the bus lane goes. In some places, it needs to be where a protected cycle lane goes. It can be somewhere where we keep a car club car in preference to a private vehicle. So we need to have some sort of hierarchy about how we're using the highway in different parts of the city. And we're making best use of that space for the people who live in that area. This Res Park review is not about imposing Res Park across the entire city. It's about reviewing it and working out a system that works quickly and effectively for the people who live in that area. It's also a tool to help and enable people to use sustainable modes of transport. So doing this in conjunction with the parking strategy will lead to that fairer system across the city where everybody has better access to sustainable transport and a more equitable offer to parking. And no, that doesn't mean it's an absolute right to parking. And part of that will be getting the pricing right for people. At the moment, it is not just a city centre problem. I represent a ward in York Outer. There are problems bubbling up all the time where people are struggling with parking. It's not something that just happens in the city centre. And I'm hearing requests for Res Park from all over the city. So this is a problem citywide, and it's essential, it's fundamental that we need to sort this out before we can get on with developing a movement and place plan or really enhancing sustainable transport. Because at the moment, so many streets are clogged up with cars, buses can't get through, we can't put cycle lanes in, we can't put more car clubs in. So this is a fundamental thing that we need to sort out, and I'm really delighted to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair. Lord Mayor, I wasn't planning on speaking, but just to bring to Council's attention, really, where Councillor Stewart says this doesn't affect the residents of Copmanthorpe. You may have an undeclared interest. Is it not the case, Councillor, that you drive into York from Copmanthorpe and park for free on a street in Fishergate when you come to work?
No, I can answer that. I do not. If you're asking whether I used to, that will be a different question, but you've already used up that.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, I think Councillor Revilius's response was actually really helpful. It just seems to me that there's a slight bit of disingenuousness about suggesting what I suspect maybe the Lib Dem position, that they can't support this because it doesn't have an entire transport strategy behind it. Well, actually, there are lots and lots of work going on with a transport strategy to sit alongside things like this. And I would wholly agree with the points made that actually, you know, when we're looking at the way that people are using cars, it has to be alongside public transport and sustainable transport and that sort of thing. So it would be disappointing, I think, if the Liberal Democrat group were not supporting this very timely and appropriate review. I think one of the things I just wanted to stress, which I'm sure will be part of you know, any review of Res Park citywide, is certainly in Micklegate ward, and I know this is the case in a lot of city centre wards where there has been that piecemeal approach over a number of years. We now have a number of zones where there are physically more permits have been issued than there is physical space on the road within that zone to be able to park. And some of those zones sit alongside zones where actually there's plenty of space. It's literally on the other side of the road in some cases, but people can't park and get tickets as a result. And there's nothing that upsets people more in my ward than having paid quite a lot of money for a parking permit to then get a ticket because they've parked on the opposite side of the road, literally outside their house. So I think a review of some of those zones so that we have coherent zones in areas of the city centre that have already been res parked, I think is really, really important. I'm sure that will be the case when we're going through this this whole strategy.
Councillor Mason.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I think given the time in the next motion, I'm just going to say, please can we move to the vote?
Councillor Whitcroft, do you wish to reply?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you for all of the views that were expressed. I really appreciate all of them. Thank you, Councillor Baxter, for seconding my motion. I would just like to draw the attention to those who sort of brought a bit of criticism around the plan. There should be other things around the transport strategy. Of course we should. This motion isn't about building York's new transport strategy. That work is ongoing by the administration. I highly encourage everyone to be able to get involved in that because that will provide the different and joined up aspect approach that we need to have it. Thanks to Councillor Webb and Councillor Avilius for highlighting that. Thank you for Councillor Kilbane and Crawshaw. Maybe Micklegate isn't so bad after all. And thank you to Farris Street, who provided me with the encouragement and support to bring this forward. I'd just like to finish with Councillor Fenton, because I appreciate his views, got a great deal of respect for your knowledge of transport across the city. I would have appreciated hearing those views myself rather than seeing them in the press today. And I know that all councillors should know that I will always value your feedback, whatever party you're from. I want to hear what your views are when I submit motions. You'll have your chance. I've submitted 3 motions to full council so far, and I'm hoping tonight will be one of the first of many hat tricks. I am particularly disappointed with the opposition's decision to label this well-intentioned motion for reform as a parking tax. It appears that any time any money is paid for any reason, the Liberal Democrats want to label it as a tax. Perhaps when Councillor Fenton goes to the shop for a snack, he'll complain to the cashier that they've imposed upon him a Twix tax. When he goes to the library to print up his speeches and pays his 20p per page, is he going to protest at having to pay the paper tax? And when we go to the pub after this, which I hope we all will, and it's his turn to get around in, he'll express surprise that the barman has decided to levy upon him a new beer tax. I understand the frustration that many of my residents feel, and opposition councillors may feel as well, about how Res Park fees are spent. And I'm open to doing things such as ring fencing such funding, not just for enforcement, but much needed highway repairs like fixing potholes. But it remains the case that goods and services must be paid for. And I don't want to have to explain that to people as experienced as those opposite. This motion was designed with residents in mind. Over a year of hearing residents voice their concerns about Res Park and a city that needs transport reformed. The motion addresses their concerns, starts a journey towards a better way of doing things, and that's what this council does. When we see problems, we don't ignore it, we don't kick the can down the road or call it a tax, we roll up our sleeves and we fix it. So let's do that tonight by passing this motion.
Right. I will now take a vote on the motion. All those wishing to vote for the motion, please raise your hands now. And all those wishing to vote against the motion, please raise your hands now. And anybody wanting to abstain? We make that 23 for the motion, 17 against and 3 abstentions. Therefore, the motion is carried. I now invite Councillor Runciman to move the fourth and final motion, which relates to dignity in retirement.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I make my speech, I seek Council's consent to accept the Conservative amendment. Although they're not listening.
Right, can we have a vote on that, whether or not to accept this amendment? All those in favour?
What's 20 in favour, Lord Mayor?
All those against?
23 against.
Sorry.
23 against.
Right, thank you. Any abstentions? That's 20 to accept and 23 rejections, so it's not accepted.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to propose the Liberal Democrat motion promoting dignity in retirement for York's pensioners. Much has been made by the Labour Party over the past 14 years about the Tory austerity programme. It's a shame that after years of Conservative cuts to the welfare budget, there now seems to be more of the same from Labour. The most controversial measure this Labour government has introduced is their cut to millions of pensioners' winter fuel allowances. These are vital for those living in poverty and take support away at a crucial time. It is notable that there was resistance from the government side when this came to a vote in the Commons. There are currently 800,000 pensioners in the UK that are entitled to pension credit and do not receive it. This includes 1,639 pensioners in York. The cut could mean they have to choose between eating and heating, and in the 21st century, that's a disgrace. This is made worse by a Labour council that seems to have lost its way when it comes to protecting York's most vulnerable residents. We have calculated that the combined effects of the winter fuel payment, the loss of cost of living payment, the rise in the energy price cap and the green bin tax will result in the most vulnerable pensioners losing £700 off this year. This is not what our residents would expect and not what they voted for. At the same time, Labour have decided to cut runs them. All right. Sorry, Lord Mayor. Provide a place to go and meet friends, a place to get involved in activities with others, and a place to get a hot meal. They are vital to support independent living for as long as possible. Retirement, in my view, should be enjoyed and not endured. Liberal Democrats feel that the Council should do everything it can to help ease the pain of Labour's austerity programme. It's good to know that a pension credit take-up campaign is underway, and we will be very interested to hear the results. All those currently not signed up to pension credit need to know their entitlement. In addition, the Council should not reduce the number of warm spaces, restore dial and ride, reverse their cuts to day clubs, waive the green bin tax for pensioners, and refund pensioners that have already paid. This could be a very hard winter for many pensioners, and we want the Council to make things easier for them and not more difficult. Please support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Oh, no, I can't see. Councillor Vassey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My comments focus on just one important area of this motion. Back in 2019, my father was a busy man with an active social life, campaigning, helping to run York Against the War stands in the city centre, attending public meetings, visiting friends. Then COVID happened. And he, like thousands of others, never really recovered. At the start of this year, I was spending 2 or 3 hours a day caring for my father. His health was failing. He was miserable and agitated, lonely and frustrated. The council's social services department were wonderful. They made many suggestions to help. The falls prevention team, helping with organising meals and medications, information about benefits and so on. To try to protect my father from the growing ravages of vascular dementia, officers recommended the York Age UK day clubs because they provide opportunities for social interaction and help many hundreds of people. On the 8th of March, I submitted the application form. You might not expect this in the wake of the administration's claim that the York Day Clubs was expensive for users, but there is a waiting list. The service is actually popular and is cherished by the users and their families for the vital respite care it gives. A full day session costs just £12, including lunch. That's including a meal. This is very reasonable. So let's not pretend that the cuts are happening because the service is either unpopular or too expensive with the users. It is hard to overestimate the value that day clubs give. Human beings are social animals, and the legacy of COVID is not going away. The sadness is that the austerity, that endless language of belt tightening, has not gone with the passing of a Tory government. It's alive and well under Labour, it seems, and is being used here to justify cutting services to the vulnerable. By the time a place at the York Day Clubs became available for my father, it was too late. But it's not too late for hundreds of other vulnerable older people and their families. You can still help them in their hour of need. I can only urge the administration to think again about this cut. York Age UK clubs are important. Let's find a solution to save this valued service. Please support this motion.
Thank you. Notice has been received of another amendment. Before considering the substantive motion,
Just a point, I just want to double check. I mean, I'm sure this is the case, but as I understand it, we've voted on the fact that Councillor Nichols' amendment shouldn't be part of the substantive motion. But do we not vote on it having heard the amendment as proposed by Councillor Nichols? Because we were without his incisive arguments that could have made the difference.
my understanding was that that council had voted against.
But didn't we vote against
to the monitoring
taking it as part of the
officer.
amendment of the motion?
Make it longer.
Councillor Stewart, apologies. Notice has been received of 2 amendments to the motion as set out in the supplementary papers. I now invite Councillor Nichols to move the first amendment as set out in the supplementary agenda.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to reread my original words as opposed to my amended words because I've got confused. I'd like to thank the Lib Dems for taking my amendment to the motion in the first place. And I hope the council leader and her colleagues will, unlike their parliamentarians, show support for pensioners. Some whose income of £13,000 will lose their winter fuel allowance. And hopefully once the Chancellor's finished claiming her parliamentary fuel allowance, she may wish to reconsider her decision. Before Labour councillors start raining against this motion, I'd like to think what their language would be if this was a Tory government taking away the winter fuel allowance, because that's what this sounds like. You are attacked on a Conservative government when you start. Here in York, Labour when taking over the council, complained of a gap in the budget, but your choice was not to attack those most in need. It was the opposite. Where you could, you supported them. Free school meals, improvement in SEND provision. You didn't abandon the needy. Perhaps they can make their point and ask their two MPs, make that point and ask their two MPs to reconsider their lack of support and opposition to the government's decision. It is clear on the council can take action, as the Lib Dems have pointed out, remove the green bin tax. And as someone who's on a parish council, I know that we can also play an active part in supporting pensioners. My final ask of the leader and her colleagues is to do what their government won't do, and that is to reassure pensioners that they will not be attacked again by having their free bus passes taken away or the loss of a single personal council tax allowance. Their ministers are not saying that they will stop those things happening. These pensioners deserve our support. I hope my motion can be supported by all councillors to show that the pensioners of York, the Labour government may not be on their side, their MPs may not be on their side, but all councillors are on their side. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a seconder?
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
I now invite debate on the amendments. I can't see anyone.
Councillor Nichols now gets the chance to reply if he wants.
So, Councillor Nichols, would you like to reply? No? Okay. Shall we move to the vote then? If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hand now. If you wish to vote against the motion, the amendment, please raise your hand now.
23.
Are there any abstentions? That makes it 20 for the amendment and 23 against. The amendment fails. Thank you. I now invite Councillor Rose to move the second amendment as set out in the supplementary agenda.
I'm certain that we're all tired of talking about difficult financial decisions, but after 14 years of vicious austerity by successive Conservative and Tory Lib Dem coalition governments, and more recently a cost of living crisis and uncontrolled energy companies and spiralling housing costs, the council and city are far worse off, the country and government are far worse off, and we as individuals of all ages are far worse off too. Every decision in politics today impacts people, whether charging us taxpayers more or giving us service users less. All we can do at a national and local level is ensure that aid is targeted towards those most in need. Means testing is therefore critical to protect the most vulnerable and poorest. Winter fuel allowance switching to means testing is right, and the Lib Dem 2017 manifesto contained a proposal to means test winter fuel allowance too. The issue is where the threshold for means testing should sit. And given the concern that some who narrowly miss out on current criteria may be in need of support, we would like the government to look at this again. National finances desperately need stabilisation to ensure we can meet future needs, but we need eligibility criteria to be carefully scrutinised to ensure they're appropriate. And here in York, we have similarly tough decisions. We can't recklessly raid reserves and one-off pots of money if we want to avoid bankruptcy. Everything that is cut is something we don't want to cut. In the instance of these day clubs, they were expensive per person for both the council and for those attending. Dementia day clubs are still funded. The decision was taken many months ago with the understanding that day club users would be supported to find alternative groups that were local to them. And crucially, all of us and external organisations are well aware that the council can't continue to roll contracts without review. Adult social care funding can only match social care needs, and that's the brutal reality of current council budgets. We definitely need better ways of tackling isolation and loneliness for everyone of every age and every financial bracket, and it must be a council priority. And I know that the council leader continues to make the case for more local funding from the government too. The pension silver lining is that around 880,000 of the most vulnerable are eligible for pension credit without currently collecting it, and the amount they'll receive is tens of times greater than the winter fuel allowance. Here in York, the council is already writing to everyone it has details for and can legally contact to urge them to claim what they are entitled to. And the state pension is on average £800 to £900 more than a year ago. The triple lock is protected. Energy bills this winter are on average £100 or more lower than last winter. The government is delivering £150 of warm home discounts, extending the vital household support fund, and of course continuing to provide 1.5 million people in the most need with winter fuel allowance. But the silver lining isn't enough assurance. We need to ensure that the threshold for means testing is right. One final quick point. I find it curious that seemingly one Lib Dem confessed to intentionally breaking council rules with wrecking amendments. One couldn't amend to say with appropriate consultation, and the Lib Dem leader is pretending they're not opposed to national Lib Dem policy only within the boundaries of York. But we write fixing amendments, and we're open about asking the government when we need it. Thank you very much.
May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I'm just nipping in before the guillotine. Given the financial backdrop locally and nationally, it is sometimes quite frustrating to sit here and watch the stable door approach and tone of the substantive motion from the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives amendment. Dignity in retirement didn't feature during the Conservative and Liberal Democrats' national period of austerity, leading to the shameful increase in the use of food banks over recent years. The stable door slammed to the Liberal Democrats in 2023 as the horse was running down the road and the Labour administration inherited a £44 million black hole in the council's finances. Nationally, the stable door is also closed to the Conservatives and their amendment. The new Labour government has inherited a £22 billion black hole thanks to the crashing of the country's economy and finances by the Conservatives' incompetence. What a mess. Dignity and security in retirement rely on our amendment so that the triple lock for pensions can be protected. Pensioner entitlement to financial support is an important issue reflected in the amendment proposed by Councillor Rose, and is an issue that has come up for me repeatedly in community drop-ins in my Westfield ward. This amendment importantly states the council's important responsibility to alert households about the benefits that they're entitled to and how to claim them and the support that's available to them. And that work is already underway. 2 pensioners I spoke to in Chapel Fields and Foxwood last week were concerned that they accessed their entitlements, so I supported them to do that. And we shouldn't pretend that we can't see this stable and the state of it. This amendment is about addressing wider issues at play, delivering security in retirement via a strong and stable economy and nationally, and control over our finances locally. And it's a call to all of us to ensure that our older residents are properly supported and able to claim the things that they are entitled to. I urge Council to support the amendment.
Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Don't worry, Councillor Nichols, I'll avoid raving in my contribution. Just today in my decision session, I and Councillor Webb heard from officers about the excellent work that is already being done and has been done over the last year by officers to support those who need it most across our city. The team are already proactively working to target support for those who are not currently receiving pension credit but are eligible, and they're also working to target those who might be in the zone of just missing out on pension credit, but may be entitled to either ongoing support or to one-off support available from the council. If anyone is interested in looking at this more closely, there are about 110 paragraphs of report detailing this, and it was well discussed in the decision session this morning, and it's a shame that nobody came along to make important contributions that they seem to have wanted to make. Officers are hampered because they are not given data freely from DWP about all of the people who may be entitled to pension credit. But those who were at the decision session or listen to it later will hear about hundreds of letters that have already been sent to people that we do know about who are entitled to pension credit and are not claiming it. We're also getting on with it and working hard to support residents, and our Talk Money campaign in November will also focus on getting everyone all the support that they need, everything that they're entitled to, and filling the gaps that are left by a system designed to keep people in poverty. And of course, we would prefer to have a system where this sort of support was unnecessary, where no one was forced to make difficult choices about heating or eating this winter. But I am so grateful that we have a team of officers, of volunteers, of partners working right across the city who are doing everything they can to support those who need it most. Either pensioners who are worried about how long they can keep the heating on this winter, or families who are worried about how they will deal with holiday hunger. I urge you to come together and support this motion. And if you want to know more about what we are doing, then feel free to ask.
Councillor Smalley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and apologies, Councillor Lomas, I couldn't go to your decision session. I had to work because the Smalley Golf Reserve that I know you know a lot about is running a bit low this month. I would guess that not many residents thought that voting Labour in the general election would mean an immediate attack on the poorest in society, or that they would immediately scrap next year's introduction of a cap on personal care costs, as well as scrapping investment in roads, railways and hospital buildings. Age UK estimate that at least 2 million pensioners who are just above the pension will now face the choice between heating and eating this winter because Labour have removed the winter fuel allowance. Britain's state pension is already one of the lowest in Western Europe. Nearly half of all pensioners have an income below the £12,500 level where income tax starts. Over 70% of all pensioners with disabilities will be having the winter fuel payment removed with no risk assessment whatsoever. The two-child benefit cap introduced by the Conservatives in 2017, now Labour MPs have voted to keep it. That means 300,000 children living in poverty. The average Labour MP claims £400 a year in expenses to heat their second home. Yet only one Labour MP voted against scrapping the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. The Labour Party's own research during the last government predicted that nearly 4,000 extra OAP deaths would occur each winter if the winter fuel payments were scrapped. All of this while Sir Keir Starmer accepts over £100,000 worth of entertainment, clothes and freebies, whilst he whacks up pay for cronies in Number 10. Now, Labour councillors can try and amend away their broken promises, but the people of York will remember. You might think we're rubbing our hands on the opposition benches, anticipating landslide elections as voters abandon Labour. These landslides will happen, but the problem you've given us is that so many voters will want to dump the party of broken promises that you've given us too many wars to target. That's many more leaflets and bar charts than we'd anticipated. Worry not, we will rise to that challenge and your government's betrayal will be rewarded by Labour losing councils like York at the next election.
Thank you. Councillor Wardby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to apologise about jumping up to put my hand up because I can't see you, so I assume you can't see me. But here we go. I'd like to speak against this amendment because it removes the request for the executive to consider reversing the cut to funding for the Age UK day clubs. Back in February, the Liberal Democrat group proposed a budget amendment that would have protected the funding to Age UK to keep the day clubs running. We knew the importance of these day clubs for many older people across the city, and we had real concerns about the impact of these day clubs closing down. Over the past few weeks, it has been very upsetting to read in the press and watch on the TV the reaction of older people whose day clubs are being taken away from them. One lady interviewed on Look North said that she had cried buckets since the news was announced, and I'm sure that she was not the only one. The relatives of one other older lady told the press about the impact on their aunt, Eileen Lockwood, who is a 96-year-old widow and has lived in the same bungalow in Rawcliffe since 1961. They said that Eileen was worried about attending the day club at first, but after she started going, the change in her was incredible. Attending the day club had led to a transformation of her character, which is why they are so devastated about it closing. Please reject this amendment and back the original motion so that we can help people like Eileen and other residents affected by this cut. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is another wrecking amendment. Rather than simply voting on the motion, it's almost like we wanted to waste time on pre-prepared speeches rather than actually face scrutiny and answer questions. It is clear that some in this chamber, on both sides, and some of our local MPs at least, are embarrassed by their party's national and local policies, but this can't be airbrushed out of history. No amount of hiding behind the triple lock will fool those facing a net £700 increase in winter fuel next month. No amount of changing the word cut to agreed savings will fool those cold, isolated, vulnerable residents stuck at home because this administration didn't even understand what contract it was cutting. The least said about the 11th hour letter sent under duress regarding our fully costed budget amendment, the better. What is true is that amendment was signed off by all relevant officers, and a number of those measures contained have been stolen by this administration, including using the public health reserve. I think worst of all, the inclusion of the 470 figure is just plain wrong. Officers have stated, as we already knew, that this is purely the people we are aware of through council tax support and housing benefit. It's not the total number of entitled residents. This shows a worrying lack of understanding from the Labour group regarding the severity of the problem we face. Or maybe you just don't want to help those pensioners. It's telling that you're willing to print and then shred 60,000 letters to save your skins in a by-election, but not to print far fewer to protect our most vulnerable residents. Perhaps this is because we all know this government saving is predicated on those people not taking up the option, as it would cost more if they did than any savings achieved. Elsewhere, the amendment seeks to justify cancelling the Age UK contract. This is not amending the motion, it's negating its very heart. It seeks to change the emphasis from cancelling the cut to winter fuel to tweaking the means testing, again negating the point of the motion. It seeks to delete the very simple financial pressures faced by residents in this city. Not amend or clarify, just whitewash. £700 for someone probably earning as little as £13,000 a year. You may wish to bury your heads in the sand about the financial reality of the new Tory-like government, but those choosing whether to heat or eat are not that fortunate. The amendment makes clear the leader will not sign the Age UK petition, doesn't commit to review of the green bin tax for our elderly and vulnerable, doesn't commit to review cuts to Age UK or Dial and Ride. It commits the council to none of the simple steps it could be looking at to make decisions now, not later. This amendment removes any commitment, unsurprisingly, to keep open all our libraries as the safe, warm spaces for those who are suffering the most. As with the previous motion, it's nothing more than a wrecking amendment. It should have been ruled out of order, and certainly no one in this chamber should support it.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's quite interesting to hear so many complaints about wrecking amendments when Councillor Smalley earlier boasted of how many wrecking amendments he'd written during his time in administration. But I think that's a bit of a by the by. I think the tone of this discussion is it seems to me to be slightly at odds with what I kind of see as some of the reality here. Personally, and I'm speaking personally here, I'm a huge fan of universal benefits. I believe in universal benefits on child benefit, on things like, you know, they say something about the society that you live in, and hopefully with a progressive taxation system, you claw back those benefits from the people who can well afford to do without them. And, you know, that to me is a reasonable way of operating. The winter fuel payment was introduced by Tony Blair about 30 years ago. And during that time, the income of pensioners, people over the age of 65, and their net worth has largely increased on average. So pensioners are actually the demographic group that is least likely to be in poverty. And the estimates are that around 25% of people over the age of 65 have assets of over £1 million. Now, I fully accept some of that will be in housing, but it is disingenuous to suggest that every single pensioner is frail, poor, unable to heat and eat, all those sorts of things. There are clearly, demonstrably, a significant number of people who fit that category. And it is absolutely right that we target as much support to those people as we possibly can. Vince Cable in 2017, I think it was, when he was the leader of your group, proposed means testing the winter fuel payment because he felt that it was unfair for people who could well afford to do without it to be being given £200-300 to give away to charity, as I know some members of your group publicly say that they do. So I think that there are conflicts here in terms of where we think we should be on winter fuel payment or otherwise. But the reality is, as I think we all know, that there are some really, really difficult choices that have to be made under the current system that we have. Nobody at any point during this debate has talked about the enormous profits that energy companies make. And we're arguing over 300 quid on a winter fuel payment. I think actually, if we are really genuine in our desire to make the society more equal and support the more vulnerable, the tone and the tenor of the discussion and the level at which we're having that conversation needs to be raised, because fundamentally we have a very, very unequal society, and a 300 quid piecemeal payment is really not touching the sides when you're paying 25, 30, 40% of your income sometimes on basic fuel and energy costs. And the one other point, if I may, Lord Mayor, super quickly, I wholly agree with Councillor Runciman, who said that, when retirement should be for enjoyment. And I couldn't help but think, when you said it shouldn't be about enjoyment, that what are you doing here? We're all here enduring this. Surely we should all be enjoying something else. And to that end, perhaps we could move to the vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, I very much agree with the points Councillor Crawshaw's made about too unequal a society and also wrecking amendments. You know, the Lib Dems have undoubtedly put in lots of wrecking amendments in the past, and we've seen this shocking revelation tonight from Councillor Smalley that he wrote some of them. It doesn't mean the Labour group needs to continue doing that. And we've seen two absolutely absurd wrecking amendments tonight, and this in short is politics at the worst. Councillor Coles has told us about this incredible £22 billion black hole, a black hole which includes all of the money that Labour gave to the train drivers who'd given them money through the unions in the election. So to say there was that black hole is to say the Conservatives would have definitely financed the extra money for the public sector workers and everything like that, which I presume Labour would say the Conservatives wouldn't have done. The UK has the most open government finances anywhere in the world. If anyone could tell me a country which has more open finances, please do, please shout it out. There simply isn't one. And in the election campaign, Keir Starmer, when he wasn't telling us his dad was a toolmaker, was telling us over and over again how bad a state the country was in, how there was no money left. And Labour weren't saying we might have to cut fuel allowances to pensioners. They were saying the Conservatives will do it. They were always saying the bad Conservatives will do it. It is absolutely politics at its worst that all these Labour councillors sat here who 3 months ago would have been saying we must keep the fuel allowance, the Conservatives might cut it, are now saying that it's absolutely the right thing to do. And if you look at Councillor Nichols' amendment, which I thought was brilliantly put, and look at the words in it, what are Labour councillors disagreeing with in it? I know that's already gone, but you know, we want our MPs to battle for us, we want an awareness campaign, and we want to fight for pensioners' free bus passes. What are Labour councillors disagreeing with? And it's this absurdity of the Labour government does something, so you must support it, even though we know 3 months ago you'd have absolutely opposed it. That is politics at its worst. So we shouldn't have these wrecking amendments. We should stand by convictions and say what we believe and stick to it.
Thank you. Councillor Runciman, do you wish to reply?
Yes, I do, please, Lord Mayor, although I do regret when speeches turn into party political broadcasts, but I won't say any more about that. I have been on the Financial Inclusion Steering Group for some time. I'm well aware of the work that's done to help pensioners in this city. But as Councillor Eyre has said, I felt this was a wrecking amendment, and I still feel it was a wrecking amendment. And one thing I want to say very clearly is, in my very long experience of local government, once you put means testing in, then you reduce the take-up, because means testing is so complicated. Some forms can be 20 pages long for some of the benefits, and it's very effective in depressing demand. And I have a very strong suspicion that that is what's happening here. And I can also say in my 8 years as the executive member for adult social care and public health, I found with officers many ways of spending the same money more effectively. You can't keep saying we want more money, we want more money, we want more money. You just look at the money and you say, right, we'll do it differently. And one of the ways you do it differently is by intervention early, so that people don't get themselves into the sort of situation which Councillor Vassie described as you put help in early. And that doesn't require more money. It actually uses the same money or less money, and other money can be spent elsewhere. And I'm very aware of that, and that's exactly what we should be doing. And I want to finish by saying I'm pleased that the pension has been written to, but I hope Council will get feedback on the take-up. And I don't bet, but I will put money on the fact the take-up won't be as high as it should be. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly now take a vote on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hand now.
Lord Mayor.
Any abstentions? That's 23 for the amendment, 20 against. The amendment is carried. I am aware that we're running very, very close to the guillotine now. So
The first question is, does anybody want to speak on this?
does anybody want to speak on the substantive? Right. Councillor Steels-Walshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. So to begin with, the decision to not continue the day clubs part of Age UK's contract was a decision made due to the financial position of the council and the need for every pound we spend in adult social care to meet adult social care needs. There was a very high cost per person of these sessions of the clubs due to the contract that was awarded that paid money regardless of how many people attended. The clubs were generally around 50% full, so this cost was double for people attending the clubs. Age UK is supporting people affected by this change to find alternative activities in their local communities. The decision was made based on there being suitable available alternatives. I understand that this does not change the impact this is having on older people who are accessing these clubs, and sadly reductions in budget were necessary due to financial situation of the council and the ongoing pressures of central government funding not keeping pace with the demands we face. We continue to fund the dementia day clubs and the other services to support older people, such as befriending and a shopping service. The decision to introduce means testing to the winter fuel allowance was clearly a difficult one, but the principle is right. As our amendment makes it clear, we want the eligibility threshold to be reconsidered, but it cannot be given right given the state of the finances that this continues to be offered to the comfortable and the well-off. We urge that the government moves towards reassessing the current means testing threshold and a more equitable way of protecting people's of protecting more people while continuing to contributing to the country's black hole in the finances. The government will continue to support people by extending the Household Support Fund, which is a lifeline for people struggling with the cost of living. The 470 pensioners who are entitled to claim pension credit are being contacted and supported to claim this as well as alongside anyone else who contacts us regarding this. We will support them to claim it. And the people affected by the funding changes to the day clubs are being supported to find alternative groups local to where they live. Anyone who's affected can contact by the day clubs closure can contact Age UK or contact the council to see if they require adult social care needs assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Very briefly, I will quote Game of Thrones. Winter is coming. No review of means testing is going to happen in the next 6 months. Those bills are going up next month. That's why MPs, Labour MPs nationally, are calling on the Chancellor to use the additional £10 billion she's found to delay that cut at the very best. Means testing is not going to help anybody this winter.
The guillotine has fallen, but we are taking these last couple. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very briefly. I think we're all aware that winter is coming, and that's why we're making extensive plans that were detailed in my decision session earlier today about how we spend money differently and support people who might need it over winter. I completely agree with Councillor Runciman that early help and support is absolutely crucial. And I also agree with Councillor Runciman that it's really important that we get feedback on the progress, on the success or lack of success of any steps that we take to support people over winter. And I can guarantee to Councillor Runciman that we'll be hearing that feedback, and she's more than welcome to come along to my decision sessions and listen to it or simply ask. And of course, we're very happy to share that. We were asked earlier about letters. Well, the letters have been posted, are being posted, will be posted. And we are reaching out to throughout communities using all the resources we have to make sure that we spend money differently and we target those that need it most. We are aware winter is coming. We are aware that people, particularly vulnerable people across our city, need additional help over winter, and we're ramping up to provide the help and support that they need.
Councillor Runciman, you have the right to reply.
Only to say that I don't know why everybody keeps going on about the letters going out, because I said that in my speech right at the beginning. So the fact it's been said 3 times after that was totally unnecessary. It's the take-up I'm interested in. I know the letters are going out. I knew that well before I came to this meeting, and I'm very glad they are. Let's see who responds.
Thank you. If you wish to vote for the motion as amended, please raise your hand now.
23, Lord Mayor.
If you wish to vote against the motion as amended, please raise your hand now. If you wish to abstain, please raise your hand.
20, Lord Mayor.
The motion is carried. Right. The guillotine has fallen, so there are no questions. Item 10, the report is noted. Item 11, the report is noted. Item 12, we're moving straight to the vote. If you wish to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hand now.
I think that's unanimous.
That's unanimous, right.
Yeah.
And we're on to item 13. The report is noted. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you.
Take a vote on that.
Just a moment.
Yeah,
There's one last thing. Do I have council's agreement to approve the appointments and changes to membership set out at item 13 of the council agenda? Thank you very much. Thank you.